We're missing Karen, and Sarah may or may not join us this evening, but welcome everybody to our work session this evening. We have our city manager there on Zoom with us, and we're going to begin with our board and commission interviews. Sally Kilbride.
Yes, excuse me.
Sally, here's what we'd like you to do is come on up to the table
Okay.
and tell us why you applied to Parks and Recreation and what you think you bring to the table.
Sure. Okay. Hi, my name is Sally Kilbride, and I have lived in Webster for 9 years. I'm married, and I have 2 children: a 5th grader at Avery and a freshman at John Burroughs, where I work. Yeah, and I absolutely love living in Webster, and I enjoy the parks and all the programs through the recreation department. And I just saw that there was an opening on the commission, and I thought that might be a really good way to give back. I have a lot of thoughts and ideas, especially as a parent, that I thought might be fun to share towards the recreation program. And I go to the parks daily, and I'd love to give feedback and just, contribute any way I can. So, yeah.
Great, Sally, thank you. Does anybody have a question for Sally?
Sally, did I see you're a coach too?
I coached both my children through Holy Redeemer, so I've kind of hung up my coaching whistle, and now I'm a counselor at Burroughs, so I'm
Okay.
coaching soccer there now.
Oh,
So
nice.
I thought this might be a neat new way to kind of give back
Yeah,
to the
absolutely.
community. But I coached for about 9 years
Yeah.
with Holy, soccer, softball, basketball.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank
Anybody else have a question for Sally? Okay, thank you very much, Sally. We'll let you know. We have another interview at our next meeting for Parks and Recreation, so we'll go there. Hi, Karen. The Sustainability Commission, we have Amina Anwar. Did I say that right?
Very close. Amna Anwar.
Amina Anwar. Okay. Amna has applied to the Sustainability Commission, and we're going to ask you the same thing. Tell us why you've applied. What we'll bring to the table.
Sure. My name is Amna. I work in the Office of Sustainability at WashU. I'm the sustainability coordinator there. So sustainability is kind of my life, professionally and at home. A friend of mine is on the Sustainability Commission and mentioned there's an opening, and so I applied. I'd love to give back to the community. I've lived in Webster for 6 years. And so I really would just like to give back to the community, and I really see a lot of opportunities for Webster to be kind of an example in the future.
Anybody have a question for Amna?
Thank you for considering giving us part of your life.
Thank you very much. I'll let you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
She has a sustainable shoes on too. Right? Yes,
they are.
that's how sustainable she is, that she's got those sustainable Rothy's on.
Ah,
How's
okay.
that? Carla Armbruster, we'd like you to come on up. I think we're talking about an ad hoc position for you.
That is what Jamie said, yes. So my name is Carla Armbruster, and I have lived in Webster for 19 years. And I teach at Webster University, where I chair the Sustainability Studies Committee, which is an academic, we oversee an academic minor. So I'm not directly involved with the sustainability of the facilities and things like that, but still thinking a lot about sustainability. And Jamie Hassemeyer had reached out to me in the spring and suggested that this might be a good way for us to connect. And, I thought about it for a while. And then I saw the call come out, and I thought, maybe this is the time to do this. And we had thought that it would actually be an especially nice way to get some of the Webster University students connected to the sustainability planning going on with the city. So Jamie let me know that we actually maybe have one too many people. So I'm willing to do it sort of as an ad hoc member. That's totally fine with me. And that's me, I guess.
Does anyone have a question for Carla? Thank you, Carla.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you. We appreciate it. And Ann Barrenkamp.
Hello, I'm here for the Traffic Safety Committee, which I'm sure everybody really wants to be on. I have lived on Elm for just 2 years, but my grandparents bought our house in 1952 or 54 or something. And we've sort of watched Elm become the traffic nightmare that it is. And so I'm frustrated, but I want to turn my frustration into action and give back to the community. And I have a little baby, and so I want her to be able to toddle around. And I think there's a lot we can do, practical steps that won't cost a lot to make a change.
Does anyone have a question for Ann? We've had lots of phone calls and exchanges, and I think this would be a great swap for you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks. All right, I think that's
We
it.
have Angela Thompson too for historic
Oh,
preservation.
Angela is here. Good. All right, thank you.
Yes, I'm
Same
Angela
thing.
Thompson for the Historic Preservation Commission. And I am an architect. I've worked in historic preservation for about 25 years. So I guess I'm in the same boat. My life is historic preservation now that I moved to Webster Grove 7 years ago and live in an old house, what I always wanted to do. And I love being here with all the old homes and all that kind of thing. So you know, being on the Historic Preservation Commission would be a little bit different than being a preservationist for hire, as we often say. So, you know, I'd like to do that, to be able to help people with their house. It's actually what I'd like to do. I'd love to be able to help people. So giving back to the community, especially since it's such a beautiful place with all the old buildings and all that sort of thing. So,
Great. Yeah.
It's hard to recognize you with masks
So Angela's been a great member of the ARB, so we appreciate your work on that. Any questions for Angela?
Angela, what type of suggestions might you provide to assist in potentially minimizing some of the requests that we have for demolition? I mean, you know, we have great homes here in Webster, and I've been the liaison for the preservation committee. Did I say that right?
Commission, but
Yeah,
who cares?
okay, yeah. So, and it just, it's really disheartening to see the number of requests that come through for demolition, and the only criteria we have to prevent it is their historic significance to the property. What kind of suggestions might you have that might assist in? That's a big question.
that's a very big
I was gonna
question.
say.
Actually, it's a really big question. And actually, it's something that I would love to work on. It's part of the reason that I kind of felt compelled almost to try to do something a little bit more. Because when we see that in that architectural review board, we see the new houses coming in and they're fine, but they're not the old ones, you know, they're not. And so it would be nice to be able to do something. I don't know if I've often thought of, is there a way to have a group that informs people of what you could do with your house? You know, what the good bones are there, what's good about it. And, you know, it's not every house.
Right.
There are some that it's just the way it goes.
Right.
It's not in good shape for whatever reason.
Mhm.
But there's others that are wonderful houses that we see go away, and it's just, you just want to
Yeah.
scream, like, why is that happening? And so I'm not sure. I'd love to look into some of those kinds of issues more of what we, you know, because there's also a legal matter if it's someone's property.
Right.
It's not ours.
Mhm.
So that's always an issue of what is happening. How can you sort of attract a contractor who's more interested in keeping the house? You know, how do we do that? How do we get those people to look at the house and buy it, as opposed to the one who's much more interested in tearing it down?
Mhm.
So, because, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's not going to be a person who's, you know, just going to be donating stuff, right? You know, we need somebody who's going to be able to make a living. And we do have some people in the community who come in and renovate some of the homes.
Mhm.
And some of them are done very well,
Mhm.
very nice job. So if there's a way to somehow, I don't know what it is, encourage people like that, whether it's, you know, encourage them to come to homes that are for sale that we'd like to not see demolished, that we worry about a little bit, or something like that. I don't know. But I would love to figure out what other communities have done, because I'm sure there's something that we could do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll deal with our memberships at the end of.
Everyone's free to go to interview that we like.
Yes, we'll let you know one way or another.
Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, regular agenda. Is there anything on the regular agenda that we need to deal with?
Just that we will need to do amendments for the 2 tax bills. And
And
Laura's on
Katie
it.
gave me the
So
cheat
you
sheet,
have
so
it?
I can do
Okay,
it. Yep.
you've got the cheat sheet. Good, good deal. Thank you. Then let's go to the meeting issue updates, and we'll just go around the table and we'll start with you, Neil.
I have nothing to report. I did sit in on the PCD last night and it appears that they're waiting to get back to work and get more information. So that was interesting meeting. I think they meet me in next Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah, next Tuesday. So I'm chime in and take a look, see what they're doing. Other than that, I have nothing.
Also the Historic Preservation Commission, again, they are, one of the things that they asked us to consider in considering new members is to, and I didn't even think they asked this while they were just here, but, really looking at their availability in terms of the schedule, because we just had 2 people that had to resign because their schedules don't allow them to attend the meetings. And so there's been a couple of instances where, I mean, well, quite a while where several meetings in a row where there wasn't a quorum. So we couldn't have a meeting. So just to take that into consideration when looking for someone new, the replacement. And then the other thing that they would really like to see considered is the potential of having someone that's a member of the Historical Society also being a member of the Historic Preservation Commission to see, you know, what type of synergies or things might be able to occur with that type of input from someone. So they're, again, and they're looking at different types of projects that they might do for going forward, but that's what I have for the Historic Preservation.
And perhaps you should look at the meeting times and dates and find one that works better for the commission, because you can always do that.
When
You can change your meeting dates and time,
mm-hmm.
and maybe there's something better that works.
I was just gonna say, we've already looked at that and we just don't have any available nights. We've changed it twice already. This was the
Okay.
best that we could go with. And just so you know, Angela specifically now has additional time. All of her kids are out of the house. And so that's why she's asked to be on both ARV and historic preservation, because she has the extra time.
And
So
I
that's
asked her
good.
too.
Yeah, that is
That's
a good thing.
Yes.
And I think the projects that they're interested in, that she's gonna be very excited about.
Did I miss anything else, Mark?
Just that they're narrowing down on 3 projects, working on, the Lustron homes, a tour of Lustron homes,
The Joy
Joy
home.
Built homes, and
The Sears
the
kit.
Sears Kid homes.
Good.
They're gonna focus on those and try to
Mhm.
get subcommittees, going with the 3 of them.
And I can contact someone at the Historical Society to see if anybody.
So I'm already in touch with Ginger Kruger, and she and I have a phone call, I need to call her tomorrow. And we were already gonna try to coordinate, on seeing if there was someone that could be a joint. I think they are also asking for, you all to appoint someone to also be on their board. So I'll be talking with Ginger to see if she has anyone who might be able to also, meet. And then there was someone else who I think had applied for historic preservation, who had been on historic preservation a number of years ago and wanted to come back. They just moved back to town. He didn't call, okay. So we have another,
We'll see what we come up with.
yeah, there's another gentleman who has contacted us.
Tom Gressel.
Yes.
Laura?
Sustainability Commission met yesterday. We are in the midst of gathering survey responses at the commission. They had 50 responses from businesses, and now it's being distributed to residents. Jenny put it out on Facebook today. So those of you who do Facebook, if you would share it widely, please. So many people. Yeah, so many people actually respond. I think the intention is to keep it open for quite a while in order to make sure the number of responses goes up. There are some promotional materials from the Sierra Club and resources to highlight our signing the Mayors for Clean Energy pledge. So they're looking in to see what that is. And there's some resources that we might be able to fold into the sustainability plan as well. SG Collaborative is coming to their October meeting to discuss the project with members of the commission. And I think that's about it.
Speaking of sustainability commission,
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to propose to have considered allowing the use of the goats for residential. I've been in the mix of an experiment. I've had 2 goats in my yard for 2 weeks, trying to get rid of the invasive honeysuckle and the winter creep that has totally engulfed my fences. And where I live, I go right down into the Deer Creek watershed. So I've been adamant about not putting using chemicals in my yard because it goes straight down to the creek. And in 2 weeks, those goats have cleared all of that stuff off of my fence. And before bringing that forward, I wanted to see, first of all, how it worked. I wanted to see if they were destructive or a nuisance of any kind. I wanted to see what the neighbors thought about their being there and the presence. They absolutely love them. They're quiet. You don't even see them. They're not destructive. And the most, I was talking to the owner, the most that you would have is 3. I've had 2. And I have a ½ acre. And I mean, they cleaned that, you could not see through the fence. It's a chain link fence. They completely cleaned it off. So now all I'm doing is removing the stick. But I would really like to have us consider, since we're in the mix of the pilot for using them commercially and for the parks and things, I would really like to propose that we allow that for residents as well, because it is a phenomenal, environmentally responsible approach to weed control.
Well, good. Then let's put that on our list of things to consider as we move along. Laura, anything else from you?
No, that was it for me, Mayor. Thank you.
Katie?
No, thank you.
Eric?
Nope.
Marie, in your empty seat, do you have something you want to add?
Yes, ma'am, I do. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. First is regarding the ARP funds. As Mr. Peterson shared with you all last week, we did receive our first wave of those funds, which was a little over $2.3 million. As we plan use of those funds and await final direction from Council, I do recommend that we deposit those funds into a short-term CD. Even 60 to 90 days would yield some earnings. And we are allowed to use those investment earnings however we desire. So that could, and it won't be a lot. The interest return rate is not great, but even if we just had a few $1,000s from the 2.3 million, we would be able to use that in other ways and not have restrictions. And so I'm guessing that as we go through this meaningful process, that we're not in a hurry or have any shovel-ready projects right now, and so that we could wait 60 to 90 days for an investment.
I think that sounds like a good idea. I see everybody's head shaking yes.
Okay, excellent. Then we will move forward with that. And then just a couple other things. October 5th is going to be an exciting work session. So on October 5th, in preparation for the Council's October 15th strategic planning, I'm going to present some updated city employee data as well as city data as a whole. You know, who lives here? Who comprises Webster Groves? We're also going to share some additional information just on what the strategic planning process will look like for October 15th, along with our SWOT process and survey process. So excited about that. And then also on October 5th, Gloria Carter Hicks, our diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, and her team are going to be present, and they're going to present an overview of their findings from the employee interviews, focus groups, and as well as from the community focus groups. And they're going to share next steps on the surveys as well. So excited to be able to share that. And that's all that I had, Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, the Green Space Advisory Commission met last Monday. Phil House was there and he presented an overview, and the overall theme of what his presentation was about the connectivity of the project. And talked about using Great Rivers Greenway and some of the public spaces to activate the neighborhoods and looking to promote connection rather than us operating in silos as individuals. The main question that came up for Phil was, or the overarching idea was, is that Webster is already complimented for how well we steward the environment, and that there is a lot of value in the current green infrastructure that is here. There was a lot of discussion about engineering solutions and coupling that with thoughtful renewal. So how do you find a balance between that? So what came out of that was Phil and the Green Space Advisory Commission are going to meet again with the environmental consultant called DJM, and that's going to be along with the Deer Creek Watershed Alliance Technical Advisory Commission, and that meeting is going to occur at the end of October. Then another news, the Nature Walk in the end of September maxed out at capacity with 30 people, so it was a great success. They met at the Sculpture Park and talked about native plants, the overarching theme. Make a Difference Day is October 23rd. They're going to be planting trees at Larson Park this year. The Trash Bash will be at Lorraine Davis Park, and the sign up is on Greenkeepers. Another interesting news, staff joined a tour of the Republic Waste Management's recycling facility to learn more about dividing bins at the parks was the main idea, and that was along with the Sustainability Commission. They organized that, and Yvonne was excited about that new venture. And then along with the goats, because it was such a success, she wants to try goats in the prairie at Lockwood Park. She's applied for another grant from Missouri Department of Conservation. And then over here in the spot where they did graze already, they planted river oats and other naturally occurring plants to help manage the invasive species. So there is a plan in place for next steps of how you manage it after you eat the.
I would love to know what that is. Yeah.
Come to our meeting.
I don't know,
Yeah.
when do you meet?
Mondays, first Mondays at 5:30. That's what we're. But we do get into some good conversations about that. And then second Plan Commission met last Monday as well. And the overall idea of that meeting was there were questions from the commission. We wanted to make sure that we understood that the Plan Commission is for the use of the land, not involving any funding or TIFs, et cetera. So all the uses were presented and the restrictions that were created to help guide them. There was a thorough staff analysis that was presented with recommendations by staff based on different departments. And then the emphasis was that they voted on a set of regulations to guide the design, which will then come back to the Planning Commission later. So again, there was a focus on the staff report to regulate the uses. And as y'all know, the vote was 4-4. So we will be seeing that soon. And that's all I have.
I have no update. I do have Ian piqued my curiosity as to when the Traffic Advisory Commission would be meeting or convening for the first time in, I don't know, ages.
So what if, I know one of my neighbors asked me, there used to be a stop sign on the corner of Holland and Willis.
Say that again?
There used to be a stop sign there, and it's just one of those, there's no stop sign there. It's like the straight Holland goes straight around and then turns into Willis. Willis comes up and that just merges, and cars just, And so she was wondering, what could we do to get a stop sign?
Call the police department.
Okay,
That's your first step.
and so you just, I mean, so is it any of those same parameters like when we talked about the sign for the?
They'll evaluate that corner for you. They'll evaluate the issue. Maybe there was a stop sign there that has been down now, but I think your first job is to call Dale and
just
tell him
ask
what
him?
the issue is.
Okay, okay.
Aaron, since I'm gonna be writing the code ordinance, I think I need some better evidence of it. 462 East Jackson.
Okay, all right.
Madam Mayor, Chief Curtis is coming.
I think we can get that.
Yeah, Dale is going to,
What about him? I go in this one.
Here, we got it.
Does he have a
We'll just make
question?
a pause.
No, he was responding to Councilman
Oh.
Franklin. Chief Curtis, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Eric. Yes, I was going to respond to David's question. Our intention is for early in October to convene reconvene the Citizen Traffic Advisory Commission. The first meeting to be basically to kind of go over materials on the National Highway Safety Traffic Standards and also the Manual for Traffic Devices, just to give them a background again on what kind of things are warranted for traffic controls, what it is they should be looking for. So that should happen sometime in early October. And then shortly after that, there are a couple of issues that we wanted to bring before the Traffic Advisory Commission. One of them is the Elm Avenue. The problem that we have right now, though, is that there's, as you can see, there was a lot of construction on Elm, so we can't really do a valid traffic study until that's complete. So whenever that's done, we will do that. So in any case, we expect it to be convened and to address some of those issues very shortly.
So thank you, Chief.
thanks.
So Chief, should I just like send you an email or something or ask about that particular corner with regarding the stop sign?
Sure, if you wouldn't mind, Karen, if you could shoot me an email and we'll take a look at it and we'll get back to you as soon as practical.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and finally, I had so much to say that I put them together in a page of the notes because there was just so much to relay to you. And sorry, Marie, but we'll just go through this and we'll save you this. And I want to talk about a couple of these things. If you remember, we signed a letter asking that Spire have a reprieve with their gas line because it would affect heating in St. Louis, and the municipalities we received a huge thank you from Spire. They did get granted whatever they need, an additional time frame. We have talked a lot about ARPA, and there's really a push now from the cities to change the definition of infrastructure because all the allowable uses from ARPA really affect more of the rural areas. So there's a really big push, and the muni leagues are moving on that, and I think that will happen. The discussion was needing to be careful about using funds for lost revenue, making sure that that's really tight. And they're also exploring whether ARPA funds can be used for vacant properties and tear downs, and whether or not you can, a few years ago, we took 5 houses down because they were derelict, and we don't know yet whether the ARPA funds can be used for that. At the Muni League meeting, there was a very lengthy discussion about EV ordinances. These are the electric vehicle ordinances. And the public locations for the charging stations, as well as what happens at a residential location and a commercial location. In Brentwood, there's somebody that has built a big charging station in their front yard. Is this something that you want to have happen? They talked about in England now, the charging stations you can push down into the ground and they can come up only when you need them. They're in new construction. There are a lot of codes now that make sure that you are solar ready and charging station ready. Anyhow, it was such a huge discussion. We've not done that, so I just wanted to put that out there. There are a lot of sunshine law issues right now, and both the Muni League and the MML are focused on sunshine law requests. I have to share with you that the city of Columbia in 1 month had 2,700 requests for sunshine information from individuals. And so there are companies out there now that are allowing people to make anonymous requests, and it's just getting out of line. They've got some cities where 90% of the staff time is being used for sunshine law requests. So I wanted to point that out to you. We had a discussion about the mental health court. I don't know how that works here. It may be something for us to talk about at some point, bring us up to date. Some cities are using this mental health court in a very positive way. I attached the census data, population data for all of the cities in St. Louis County. So you can take a look at it and do your own analysis. Just as the city said that they were losing population on the north side of the city, you'll notice that the population loss is also in North County here. There is a membership meeting of the Muni League next week, Thursday in Brentwood. It's a good opportunity for you to go learn something. I don't know who's speaking, I'll let you know. But it's a good opportunity to do a little bit of networking also, and it's so close by that it's really easy. Couple of other things. We are working with the county and the school district on trying to find some solutions for the safety issues created at Elm and Big Bend now that we have 1,000 kids and these kids are crossing that horrible intersection. Anyhow, we're all working together. It's been a really nice group to find funding for design and funding for implementation, and we'll keep you up on that. This year, the Arts Commission is giving the Lifetime Achievement to Stephen Wolf. As you know, he has passed, and he was the artistic director of the Rep. We're going to be included in their great big huge celebration on Saturday morning, October 16th, and we're going to give the award there as part of their celebration. The PCEB met last evening discussing the resignation of the chair and concerns around what the board can and cannot do. It was a really good discussion. We may have found some ways to address some of their concerns. Green Space did that tour last Saturday, was really great. The Green Space had the native plant tour, and I signed the Monarch Butterfly Pledge. So
There we go.
So that's on its way now. And finally, the Mml Conference, which is in St. Louis. I know Laura is planning on Tuesday. I'm planning on attending. It's a great opportunity to learn a lot, to network with colleagues throughout the state. It's easy. It's right here. There are lots and lots of good presentations. So lots of stuff, but I thought the population data was kind of interesting. And I see some of you flipped to that right away to take a look at who lost and who gained and where we are in the process. It'll be fun to see how this impacts the Pool City stuff also. So yeah, that's what I have.
When will that be in place? Would they readjust those numbers?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not exactly sure when that'll
Take effect?
That'll take effect, but I'm sure it'll happen soon. That's a really good question.
And this is, so
yeah.
this is the data they'll be using?
This is the
This is the
data, yeah,
official
this is
data.
the data that they'll be using in terms of defining the pool. And I promised a simple cheat sheet on how the pool works, and I have to tell you, it's not that simple.
Yeah.
And I pulled out my file on when we did the task force, it's about that thick, and I'm thinking, I've been going through it, trying to figure out how to do this simply.
If you
So,
can figure it out, every city in the county would be happy
I
about it.
know, it is so complicated, but we'll see. You'll get that at some point. All right, so topics, a budget estimate review. I think that's coming from Eric.
That is coming from me. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have it up here on the screen and everyone on Zoom should be able to see that. Dr. Peoples, can you say that? I just want to make sure.
You know, I can. Thank you for that. And Mayor and Council, the updates were incredibly informative. Unfortunately, we've got about 25 minutes left for this presentation, as well as the important discussion on Douglas Hill process. So we may need to go just a few minutes over. Wanted to share that. We want to make sure that we hear from Council. So thank you.
Dr. Peoples, did you say you can hear it? You can see it? I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. All right, so just making sure there, we'll get going here. Budget estimates. This is our closeout of FY21. The audit is underway as we speak. So, this is not the numbers for the final on 21. That'll come in December. This is what we're going to look through tonight. Highlights, key takeaways, all funds overview, general fund, revenue and expenditure review, and then a funds review across all the funds, and then some next steps and summary for you to take some questions out of it if you wish. So again, fiscal year, for those in the public who don't know, we run July 1 to June 30. So this is the fiscal year that just ended this summer. This budget we are discussing was adopted on June 16th of 2020. The annual audit is underway. They were literally here this past week, the auditors, and are now continuing their audit remotely. So these are estimates subject to change. COVID-19 did affect the FY21 budget, as not unsurprisingly, mostly in park and recreation fees, municipal court fines, and then utility receipts. Those are the three big areas. We'll explain those. All funds, we did receive 97% of the revenue we budgeted. We spent 90% of the appropriations budgeted. That leaves a structural imbalance of 4.453 in all funds. That number is almost all Firehouse 2 construction costs. So the budget did have in all funds more expenses budgeted than revenue. We'll get through and show how the departments were able to pull that back. But the entire revenue for Firehouse 2 was booked in fiscal year 20, but most of the expenses started in fiscal year 21. We'll discuss the purchase order carryover system we use and why that skews the numbers a bit, so you can see that. The general fund, we did receive and expend 93% of the revenue and the appropriations. So of the amounts you approved, departments did 93%. We did end with a surplus preliminary of about $286,000 in FY21. That's despite the very big cut in revenue that we took. So we'll dive into things here. Again, all funds, just showing this again. This is the budget in red, and then the actual here in the blue. There was our revenue. So you can see we're just shy of revenue. Here was our expenses, and there is, the actual expenses. So we did come under the budget number. Again, this large delta between here and here is about 6.7 million. So that's a big chunk of that is that Firehouse 2 number. Your budget you actually approved was about 2 million in imbalance in terms of expenditures versus revenues in 21. So that budget is now, that deficit was reduced to this number, which again is Firehouse 2 predominantly. There is some overspending in some of those, not overspending, but some imbalance, in the expenses. General fund, much different story. Here is the budget. Here is the actual. So revenues were down from budget. The budget revenues were slightly pulled back, obviously, and do also recognize the CARES funds in the revenue. They are counted as revenue. So there's our budgeted expenses, general fund, and we cleared both with a surplus of $286,000.
What was our care fund total again?
Which one?
How much care funds?
1.8.
All right.
Excuse me, 1.58. 1.58.
So we would have had a deficit of 1.6.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. This revenue number includes that care funds. They are counted as revenue. So hence that number, when we added those, we amended the budget to include that revenue. This is our top 5 over and under performers. So we had the top 5 revenue lines that exceeded what we budgeted are these items right here. They totaled $203,000. And that is state auto sales tax, real estate tax, the fire sales tax, tennis fees, surprisingly, and the miscellaneous income. They all exceeded budget. 25 of 61 revenue lines were above the budgeted number that we had in the adopted budget. The top 5 revenue lines below budget accounted for $1.489 million of loss. Parks and rec fees, these are many different fees, but they all combined to $528,000. Municipal court fines, $378,000 in revenue, mostly attributed. Those fines are there, but this is part of the case backlog, and will now, we anticipate so much revenue coming in, court not meeting, warrants not being issued, that whole revenue stream dried up essentially. 321,000 short on electric gross receipts, 135 on telephone receipts, and cable franchise fees at 126. Below again. So now these are unaudited numbers, so there may be journal entries that change it. These numbers were taken last Friday, and literally throughout all of the week, we're changing numbers in there to reflect the auditors say, move this expense here, move this revenue here, so this one might change.
Why such a large below budget or revenue on electric roads?
Yeah. So those utility fees, and part of this may be collection and efforts on collection if they were slowed down in any way, but also changes in usage.
Yeah.
if residentials were using and commercials are not occupying commercial space and such, you're going to see a change. Your telephone receipts are going to change and such, so.
And that's what Clayton was in trouble with, is it's the commercial
Right.
spaces that we're not using the utilities
Wow.
that hurt them.
So in reality, as we look at our revenue lines, property taxes came in good. Our municipal sales tax, the shared sales tax and such, came in good. It's these volatile things here that the pandemic really affected when we had to change the normal course of work as we've known it in life throughout the city. So this is our program expenditure. So our main programs, again, budget in red, blue is the actual. So general government, police, fire, public works, parks and planning, all programs with the exception of fire did come in under budget for FY21. And we'll get into those details right now. These are the departments that are over, very small amounts in some areas, large in some others. So city council, this parentheses here means the predominant driver of that overage. The elections cost was not budgeted, so that's going to automatically put you over budget. We have salaries and overtime and city clerk, finance and customer support over budget. That's indicative for us in finance and creating the budget to make sure we're truing up our salary estimates. Now with transitions and changes, that's going to happen where you're going to have people come in and the numbers may change. You build the budget at a point in time, different salaries applied and such. So that's on us to clean up those numbers as we build a budget for you. Professional services for every year for the last 7 years, when I look back, we've exceeded budget. We build the budget on the contract for the attorney and the prosecuting attorney, but we don't leave in any money for the ad hoc services that may come up along the way. So in this Douglas Hill conversation, the costs of Gilmore Bell that are being borne by the reimbursement from Douglas Hill still need to be booked as an expense. So they show up as an overage in the legal services budget. And then fire overtime at 28,000. That's the overall department exceeding the budget. The overtime cost was actually 62,000. There were other higher costs in certain areas, but they had some savings in other lines that brought that number down. So this is our going through each of the funds that we have. I'll just briefly walk through these. The grant fund, you can again see revenue in red, expenses in 21 in blue. There's the grant fund. The street improvement fund. I'm going to mark off some of these you did approve using fund balance for. So if you see like street improvement fund, you've essentially said, let's use fund balance for this delta of whatever it may be to cover the costs that we approved. Our next ones are public safety sales tax. We only book revenue in that account. It is then transferred to the general fund to pay ECDC and other police and fire salaries from the Prop P. Our debt service fund, there's our revenue and expenses, almost equal, slightly above in expenses. Police and fire pension fund, revenue and expenses. Again, I want to just highlight this delta. That is, again, you're using a little bit of fund balance for that fiduciary fund to pay for pension obligations. Old Webster Business District, revenue and expenses. And the same with Old Orchard, both using fund balance as they look at expenses and also carrying over expenses, which I will explain in a minute. That I keep coming back to that. I'll explain what that means. Crossroads does have revenue exceeding expenses. Just going to finish up these items here. So again, Firehouse 2, here you can see where that 4.45 number comes in. All the construction expense billed only about $90,000 of revenue, which was simply general fund money moved in off of investments and such to help cover costs in 21. Capital improvement, revenue exceeded expenses, which is good for the fund balance. And then sewer lateral, the same. Stormwater using fund balance again in the stormwater fund. And then closing out, we've got the park improvement fund, a very good year for that, revenue and expenses there. And then the general government fixed assets, that's depreciation, about 485,000, 450,000 in depreciation costs across the budget. So these are our estimated fund balances. You can see some approval. This was the, again, as of July 1 of 2021. So the ending balance of 2021, when we did the budget, we expected the number of the fund balance to be this. And now we are expecting the number to be approximately this, should all these estimates bear through and the auditors not change much. So we've got some improvement in places where we have made savings, of course, which will help. That flows into FY22, improves the fund balance as we go. Fund balance, again, is no different than your savings account that you haven't decided on how to spend. You set it aside. That's our fund balance. So in summary, COVID affected revenue. Certainly, we know that departments did a great job in reducing spending and trying to meet the budget. I'm very happy with what we see in line, especially in the general fund and how things have held. There will be an audit. We'll get those audit findings and have the actual numbers in December with our normal end of the year report to you on this fiscal year. And then our next budget process will have that forecasting model. I kept coming back to this PO carryover, and that's what I wanted to discuss. We do carryover requests here generally through a purchase order process. So if you have an ongoing project like the Firehouse #2 construction, we've created a large set of purchase orders for most of those costs of Firehouse #2. At the end of the fiscal year, that purchase order is then extended into the next year. So it binds up the money in the next year as well, so that the contractor can still be paid. And that is an acceptable way to do it. A more appropriate way may be to create a project budget and then move all those carryover requests into the budget process. So when you have this review, you have all that up front, that we're carrying over these funds for this purpose, so that an imbalance is known on the front end rather than seeing what's this $4 million imbalance that appears out of nowhere. And that's really not that it appears out of nowhere, but we don't pay much attention to that bottom line in the budget process across all funds. And those are using project ledgers as a way to do that and to look at that. It's easy to do in New World, and it allows us to not carry over POs from year to year. We still have some 2017, 2018 purchase orders for capital improvement projects open that are, plans being finished. So
Really?
yeah. So that's an improvement that we are going to suggest to you in the next budget process. So we'll highlight all the parts of that. So I will pause and take questions there. That's a lot.
Going to share, it's a lot. Are you going to share those with us? Can we have the slides?
The slides, yes, yep.
Great.
I'll send it to you.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot of information there. Thank you very, very much for putting that together. See what kind of questions there are.
I don't have any right now, but I'm sure when I look at the
Yeah,
slides.
exactly.
Yeah.
All right,
Pretty cool. Thank you.
okay.
Despite everything that went on over the past year, it's pretty amazing that we are where we are. And I think that we have the city staff to thank for that, and obviously good financial stability over the course of several years. So.
I mean, I think about that second round we did in May where we, had like 2 or 3 weeks and we made more cuts and stuff. How beneficial that was. But they seemed like they were short term also, so.
Okay.
All right.
I'm sure people will have more questions.
Yep, no problem. I'm going to bring Mark if we're ready to move on. Dr. Peoples, anything? Okay. I'm going to get Mark Grimm added as a panelist for our Douglas Hill conversation, and I'll get this.
This conversation is very critical that we talk our way through this. And if we need more time, we're just going to take more time because we have to determine some steps along the way and put some time frames in to make this process finished.
So I'm going to turn Dr. Peoples, anything you want to start with, and just make sure you can see the presentation on Zoom correctly.
Thank you for that. Well, just to welcome Mr. Grimm, thank you for being here with us this evening and for your counsel today and all the other times as we went through this process trying to understand it. And so appreciate that. And with that, Eric, and because time's limited, let's go ahead and start going through the presentation.
All right, I will do so. This is on Douglas Hill and our process, laying out some of the legislative actions that are ahead of you should the council decide to move forward. So I'm going to minimize the speakers here until we have one of them pop up. Mara will be adding some thoughts in here as well. We're going to talk about the overview of your potential actions, the zoning ordinance, the TIF ordinances, and the development agreement ordinance, and direction and discussion from you. And that's, again, the end of this. That last slide is when we really need your conversation. So we're going to roll through some education for you and for the public on what we have ahead of us in relation to Douglas Hill. So we have 3 major potential ordinances: a zoning ordinance, Tiff Ordinances, which are 3 different ordinances because there are 3 project areas designated in the Tiff, RPA 1, 2, and 3, when you read the redevelopment plan. And then the Development Agreement Ordinance, which is the ordinance assigning the contract between the city and the developer for all the provisions that the city may desire and that the developer may desire as we negotiate that contract. The zoning ordinance, and I'm going to start here and just everyone knows the Planning Commission met on the 13th. They made no recommendation, a 4-4 conversation. We have set council consideration to begin October 5th, and the legislative vehicle is again an ordinance coming to you. So I will turn it to Mara, and Mara, you just tell me when you want me to go to the next one.
Sure, thank you. This is a slide we shared with the public when we started our public hearing before the Plan Commission. It just shows a standard rezoning development process. It starts with staff researching and having meetings with an applicant. It goes through a staff analysis that eventually moves us to meetings and putting an item onto an agenda. That agenda includes a staff report with our recommendations or with our analysis. It goes to a public hearing and sometimes a series of meetings. It then makes its way to a report before the city council. That report goes into your packets prior to the meeting. It goes to a city council hearing. It then makes its way back to city council and eventually goes to the point where it's approved as an ordinance or denied as an ordinance. But those elements, that's sort of a basic flow. We can change. So just as a reminder of what we typically say to people when they come in and talk to us about how a rezoning goes through the process. It starts with a Plan Commission public hearing. If it's a very simple one with a CUP or a standard rezoning with not a lot of additional details or information, it can happen in a single meeting. And I know for those that have sat as liaisons to the council or to the Plan Commission that they've seen them happen go through quickly in one meeting. But it can be held over multiple meeting dates, and many of our more complex items are held over. It then goes to a Plan Commission vote, which is a recommendation to the city council. So they're recommending something that they've moved forward based on their review of the application. It then goes to a city council public hearing because that is how our code is written. It can also be held over multiple meetings. And then depending on when the hearing is closed, it goes to a first and second reading. During that first and second reading, there's always an opportunity for the ability to make an amendment to what has been recommended. So there is an ability to have additional smaller votes on changes to what was proposed. And then a determination is made whether it can go to that third reading or whether it needs to be held over yet another meeting if there's a substantial change between the first and second reading or a substantial change before you get to the third reading. There is always a chance that you might have to hold it over yet again for another meeting. You can go to the next one. So this is on the left what we shared with the public as it went through the Plan Commission each month. And we tried to identify and highlight which part of the meeting they were going through at that time. So we make a presentation by city staff. We go over the history of the property, the request that's happening. The Plan Commission will start asking staff various questions. We have always have different points in time for public comments regarding the application. We review our zoning analysis. Sometimes we then make additional information requests, which then holds it over to potentially another meeting. And then we make our staff recommendations at a key point. We usually have, in a very standard, it goes to a presentation and then the Plan Commission asks the staff questions. Then it goes to a presentation by the applicant. The Plan Commission then can ask questions of the applicant. We then usually go to public comments. We did it a little bit different this time and we showed the public that we moved some of the public comments much earlier in the process because we received so many early on. And we then continued to take public comments as we went through the process. Typically then there is a time where there are responses to the public questions from the applicant, which we did do at the last meeting. And then the Plan Commission makes a determination if the public hearing could be closed and takes a vote on their recommendation to council. Off to the side, you can see the various dates that we held. We opened the hearing June 7th, continue it to the 12th, again to the August 9th meeting. We then held a special meeting August 31st for additional public comment. We closed the hearing on September 13th and then took a vote. For the last slide, would just be a potential process before the council, following more of our standard procedures, but obviously there are determinations that you can make. Typically, we would come in with a staff presentation, again, reviewing the history, the request, and the analysis, and then summarize what the planning commission had brought forward to you in their recommendation. Typically then, city council asks questions of staff, and then it's usually followed by a presentation of the applicant. City council then has the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant, and then usually at that point is when you go to questions of the public. The plan commission had a policy that they allowed each one for the 3 minutes, and then if the hearing got continued over, if you'd already spoken once, that was your opportunity, but that you could provide additional written comments that were put in the packet. All of those are available on the website of the ones that came in. Typically then the city council makes a determination on whether the public hearing should be closed or held to the next meeting. And then you have those opportunities for the first and second reading, which is always held on a different date from the third reading. And we have already advertised this to go on October 5th to open the public hearing.
Do we normally allow the applicant to make a presentation?
Yes, we do. So that's it for me.
So before we get into questions and process, I just want to highlight the other two major pieces of action, which are the Tiff Ordinance, Ordinances, and also the Development Agreement. So the Tiff Commission has scheduled the public hearing on October 27th. We have action scheduled for them on November 10th. Of course, the commission may move that date around and such. It is their prerogative, but that is our, from a staff level, what we're providing to them, and they seem to be on that path from my read. We have tentatively scheduled November and December action for you as the council on TIF. Now, this goes to the issue of the change in state law, and that is that the TIF plan must be in place by December 31st. There are 3 sections of this TIF: RPA 1, RPA 2, RPA 3. RPA 1 is the largest piece of the map, and it includes the floodplain. So there'll be ordinance number 1, which must be enacted by December 31st, is the TIF plan and RPA 1. RPA 2 and 3 would come in future years because those, in the way TIF works, you have a 23-year time clock maximum on when to take the revenues from the baseline. And we don't want to start RPA 2 and 3 now because we're not planning to do any construction should the council approve this project right away in those places. So those votes would come later in potentially a couple of years later for that next segment. In fact, I think RPA 3 is planned 2 years out from now, if I'm correct, in 2023. So we would start with November, December. We would do the first readings of ordinances 2 and 3. I'm calling them in this case, and we would have the first readings and then hold those hearings open for many years. State law allows up to 10 years. And that's why we have Mark Grimm on council to help us walk through these things as we need. So we have 3 legislative vehicles for TIF, which is those 3 ordinances. 1 must be done by the end of this calendar year. The other item that must be done is the development agreement, which we have talked a little bit about, but not talked in concrete nature about. So council action, we have not put any schedule together for you. That's part of our conversation tonight. It is an ordinance that authorizes the obligations contractually of the developer in relation to this proposed redevelopment. And we're going to need your direction on what to include in that ordinance. So tonight we have some real questions to ask you. A process timeline on the schedule that you wish to see. When do you want to see these votes try to culminate? What kind of process considerations do you want for the public? And then also with the development agreement, what are the council inclusions? And I really want to phrase the question this way. What does success look like if this project is moved forward for you? What are the things that the city must see to deem this a successful redevelopment project? Is it the new fire truck? Is it, pass-throughs for school financing? Is it electric vehicle charging stations? All of those considerations, many of the things the community talks about, it's really the development agreement that is the meat of this process in terms of how the community gets what it wants out of a redevelopment, should the redevelopment move forward. So in terms of timeline, the only thing out of these 3 big things that is a must do at a certain time is TIF. We must do that November, December action on TIF. The other 2 do not have to precede the TIF. They don't have to go in line with the TIF. They can come after the TIF ordinance. So that's a question to you as the council. What do you want to do in terms of process? considering where this goes and involving the public as you look forward at the calendar moving on from this point now that the proverbial ball is in your court. So again, this is the only one with a time certain. The rest of this is at your scheduled discretion to move this as you wish.
Eric, let's pretend for a minute that we approve the TIF as a council, but we wait on obviously doing the rezoning or the zoning ordinance. And we say no to the zoning ordinance. Can we go back and take away the TIF?
So, and I'm going to turn to Mark, but the answer is yes. I mean, the TIF ordinance, even if approved, if you held the zoning and development agreement, and whether it be not approved by council or repealed by referendum, the TIF ordinance would only be effective should the whole project be moving into a realization.
So part of this would be if you approve the TIF, but then didn't approve the back end, nothing ever comes into being other than we have a TIF commission that has said, if there was something that was there, you could do this. But again, it's not a must, nothing happens. It simply sort of fails for a second.
All right.
And so the TIF approval does not tie it to a particular development then?
It doesn't. It's to an area.
It's to an area. Okay.
I'm going to turn to Mark there. Mark, just on that, it looks like you have something to say.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that just to elaborate on that last comment, the developer has no rights, no vested rights until there is an executed redevelopment agreement. And so I'm agreeing with what the others have said that if the council approves the ordinance to approve a redevelopment plan, but then never reaches agreement with the developer on the terms of the redevelopment agreement, on the inclusions as Eric referenced, then the council is simply free to at some point terminate the process and invalidate or repeal the TIF ordinance.
So Mark, while you're on and for Neil, I think what we can say and what I'm trying to communicate is council is really this agreement, the third box here, that is the culmination vote, the real move forward, yes, no, Douglas Hill, outside of zoning and TIF, that is the real agreement that effectuates the redevelopment. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
So we could effectively approve a TIF and a zoning, but fail to come to an
Absolutely,
agreement
yes,
on the
yes.
redevelopment.
Okay.
Yes. And the redevelopment agreement is that part where you are now specific about all the things that you would want to see.
So
All
if we have
questions answered.
Right.
things like eminent domain go into the agreement, correct? I'd like to get some feedback from the council. I'd like to move this process along. I think the sooner we can get going with this, the better off we're all gonna be.
To that point, that's our feedback question. So I'm going to turn it back to the council. What is your preferred timeline and order? What process elements do you want included? Do you want the big town hall? Do you want many town halls? Do you want just online engagement? All those questions. And then in the development agreement, we also need to start drafting that. So we're going to start to need to hear from you. What do you want in that development agreement? Not committing the city, but we need to start drafting so you have something to react to. So I will stop there, Dr. Peoples, unless you have anything, and let the council deliberate.
So it seems to me that by approving the TIF and the rezoning, you'd be putting the cart before the horse. Shouldn't we just go straight to the development agreement and get to the meat and potatoes? Because that's truly going to be the thing.
I also think there's a risk that if we're approving the other two, that people will think this is a done deal.
Yeah.
And we don't want to get one so far out ahead of the others that we confuse people more than the three moving parts already do.
But knowing that we have to do the TIF before the end of the year. So that's going to be a done deal regardless before we get to the agreement or to the zoning. So me, there's a lot of questions I still need to have answered to say what goes into the agreement and basically in what zoning. So going back to the mayor's question, yeah, I think we need to be proactive in getting those questions answered before we start saying this goes in, this goes in. Because there's a lot of unanswered questions.
Well, I don't want to go, so.
Excuse me. Just what are your unanswered questions?
I like to see something final, like on the traffic study and what impact that's going to be. I'd like to know what's the impact on the existing businesses that's in that area. And the ones that are gonna stay, how will that impact them in their day-to-day business? Where are they at on the purchase of these properties? I don't want to back up and all of a sudden we got a lot of properties that don't want to sell, or we have to do something in the domain of it. When's the last time the developer actually talked to these businesses? Are they aware of what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, in that order?
So does the rezoning, does that apply to the rezoning and the redevelopment agreement for you, or?
Well, from understanding, the rezoning, that document goes back to the plan commission, is that correct? Maura? Or is this done?
No, it's
Okay.
done with you.
Okay, it's done with us.
And then once your regulations are in place, a development plan that meets those regulations goes back to plan commission. But you determine the final regulations that go in the ordinance to govern how it is developed.
And based on the plan commission moving that forward, they saw nothing wrong with the recommendations that they made.
It was a 4-4 vote.
Yeah.
Well,
They didn't
that's-
decide.
Yeah, they need to decide. Was something bad in the planning, in the zoning, or was it that they didn't vote?
Are you asking for more than just a vote?
Well, I guess a clarification. It was a 4-4 vote, so was there anything in the zoning that those four that voted against it didn't like? Like to know what there was.
I feel like that ship has sailed. I mean, they made a choice, each of them individually, and their individual choices means that this is now our responsibility. So I think we're the ones who have to ask those questions and make a determination, of the developers and ourselves and what we know of what the public reaction is. Because I'm with you. I would have loved a little more guidance from them, but that's not what we got.
I just hate to come back. Well, I voted no. I don't know why they went for it, but it didn't seem like they were on the same working plane.
So, you can listen to the arguments that were made.
I was there. I mean, I heard it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add to your list. I mean, I came in with a long list of things that I still would like to have clarified. One of the things that I really want to understand better is the issue of flooding. And it's not so much on the site, but if you go downstream from the site, we have things that are already currently in a floodplain. We have culverts. We're going to replace the old culvert ourselves. They're going to replace the culvert at Gore, but we've got one at Newport and we've got one under Brentwood. There's reference to this about cleaning it out. Who's supposed to clean the stuff out? I don't know who does that and who bears that cost. So I want to understand what happens downstream, because and frankly, for the public and for me too, I read the stock report and I think I read it like 3 times. And I sort of get it, but if we could get a plain language description of what the site's going to look like in terms of some of the flood mitigations, I'd be grateful for that.
That was a biggie on my list because I've actually talked to a couple of the residents that live right at Gore and Kirkland. And with this last big rain we had, they said they literally had raw sewage from that. And I'm just, what is going to be the up and downstream impact from the development there for the people that live down there, for the community?
And one of the questions, Maura, I guess, when will MSD put in what are the 3 agencies? MSD, FEMA, and the
Army Corps.
When will all those reports play a part, or those in the process?
So MSD has already finished the review of the flood study, but they're waiting on our staff review of the flood study, and we're currently working on that. After it goes through city and MSD, then they're able to move it on to FEMA. What those next steps are, I'm a little aware of. I'm not sure exactly at what point Army Corps comes into play and a couple of the other pieces. But at this point, the first 2 were MSD and the city.
Do those steps need to be completed before we move on to an agreement?
We put in the draft regulations for the development, that they have to have a CLOMAR, which is a conditional letter of map revision, prior to being able to approve a site development plan, a redevelop, the development plan that has to go before planning commission. So no, that would not be needed at this point, but it would have to be a CLOMAR already approved to move forward.
What's the geographic range of the CLOMAR? I mean, is it just that area between Gore and Rock Hill, or does it span further than that?
It can at times span further. I know when we did the CLOMAR for Brentwood, once they determined the area that they were impacting, that then was able to additionally determine who else was impacted, which is why when we signed off on the CLOMAR that Brentwood was doing, we signed off, Rock Hill signed off, other municipalities that were going to have areas that were being taken out of the floodplain because of the improvements. We were all involved in that level. So there will be a study to a certain point of what else is impacted by those improvements.
Okay. But we can't, until the study's done, we can't really define what the geography that's going to be covered is. Is that a fair statement?
I don't know enough.
Okay.
Yeah. If I had one of my two floodplain administrators.
Okay, thanks,
Do we know
Marla.
what kind of time frame it takes? A month, 2 months, 3 months?
My understanding is that they could, I think if I remember the last emails, and again, wasn't prepared necessarily for that question, but I believe it's like a 4 to 6 month time frame. In the last email I saw, there was something that George Stock had put in terms of time frame, but I can get you that information.
I was just gonna say, I have more concerns with the development agreement because I have lines in the sand that I'm refusing to permit that go in there and things that I want included in there. And I feel like that's gonna be a tougher sell with the developer than any of this other stuff in my mind. I refuse to put eminent domain in there as of right now for a project like this. I also believe that we should have access to all the financials of any tenant in order for us to ensure that we are recouping all the money that is available under the TIF. That way we have full auditing control, both of SG Collaborative and also any tenant. So I mean, those are just certain things that I think are going to be tough sells for the developer, and obviously I think it's going to be so for me. It's like voting on the TIF and the rezoning kind of meaningless without knowing what the developer is going to agree to in the development agreement.
David makes a good point. So my question on this, Neil. So when we started developing the agreement, something like eminent domain, if I want it, David don't, is that like a vote from the council?
Yes, sir.
So it can be a vote from the council only when there is a disputed issue.
Yes.
So we would vote sometimes on individual items within the development agreement as well as the agreement in total.
Every word in that agreement has to be something that each of you would ultimately approve. You can do it word by word, you can do it concept by concept, but yes.
Not each of us, right?
4 of us.
A majority.
A majority, yeah.
Yeah.
But everybody votes.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Wow.
Can I just,
Yeah.
Councilmember Franklin, ask on your question about financial access? We are not the collector for those revenues. So you're right. The county is the collector of all those revenues that go into the TIF. So that is an expansion of our work to become an auditor of revenue collection. Because we simply rely on the county providing us the revenue.
And I don't want I'm not worried about the revenue. I'm concerned about the income that's coming into the property.
Sure.
And determining whether those numbers that are then reported to the county are accurate. So in other words, I don't want to have to fight a legal battle. I just want access to it in the event that there was a need to audit.
Because it's all assessed value for a TIF. So it's all going to be through the assessor's office anyway. We have access.
Isn't there a CID here?
A CID, but that is separate from the TIF ordinances.
And it's not in front of us. I mean, it may be, but what we know right now is that they're requesting a TIF. We don't have the CID. That would be a separate ordinance that would have to be put in place.
However, the financial analysis included the CID. So,
Right.
I mean,
But that.
I think it's safe to assume we're gonna get one.
And again, that would be down the road. So in the scheme of things that Eric has set up, that would be further down the road. And again, that would still all be in place before the redevelopment agreement would be done. And that would be the ultimate word in whether this all happens.
Can I ask a basic question about the TIF? I know that that's not something where the city writes a check and says, this is how this is paid, because it's money that's being an influx of money to help make the development occur. But my understanding may be wrong, but the way that those funds are actually paid is by an increase in the sales taxes and events, essentially, isn't it? I mean, so when.
Say it again, I'm sorry.
It's the property tax.
The property tax.
Yeah, it's all after, so it's property tax.
I'm going to put you right here, Madam Councilwoman. So yes, you're right. A TIF district, and this, for folks on watching, you can see my mouse, this is the basic illustration. Not one nickel that we get, or any taxing district gets right now, goes away under a TIF. That's the baseline that is set when you approve the TIF. So ordinance number 1 that I was talking about, this first ordinance right here for RPA1. That's the baseline. We're dealing with assessed valuation in the TIF. That is all property tax money. So when the value goes up because we built on it, we can estimate that increase, that delta right there, this dark blue, and then borrow against that or pay as we go for public infrastructure costs. So streets, the floodplain improvement, acquisition of properties.
So essentially, as a real estate, as a property owner,
right,
I can expect that my real estate taxes are going to increase to pay for this TIF.
Not at all.
Only on the site.
Only on the site. This is only on the site. The map of that area that we've drawn that has been there. This scheme right here, and I'll use that term, does not apply to your residential property or anyone else's that's not in that district.
So anything.
And the taxes, your personal taxes won't go up because this is improved. Well, I shouldn't say it. They likely will not go up. As you have other improvements going on, we just see this in our tax rates. As the values go up, what happens to tax rates? They go down, right? So if your value really, if the theory is that the development's assessed value is going to rise much faster than your residential home value is going to rise. And the drop in rates are going to force a change where you actually may see a decrease. That's the theory. That's the one where you always have to walk through and how it works. I've seen it happen in TIFs where most of them, your residentials go down if the development skyrockets, as we could see.
Right. It is, I think it's important to explain that last point, but after the TIF expires, all of that comes to
23 years.
Well, and that's if we don't pay it off early. Shops at Old Webster, we obviously paid off early, so that could slide this way. So
the other thing I want to include in a development plan is the ownership of the property. I think ownership has to stay with SG Collaborative for at least 10 years. I don't want them selling this within 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, one of the plans or one of the memos we got from Development Strategies said that somewhere in this SG Collaborative said they expect to sell everything by 2029 that they construct, but Mr. Chapman has said that they're going to hang on to it. So that was one of my points of clarification as well. I really want to understand who's going to own these buildings.
So I think that in terms of the townhouses, the condominiums and that sort of thing would certainly be an outright arm's length sale that would be done. It's the rental properties that he intends to hold on to. So
yeah, and so that's a difference in terms of what we got from Development Strategies from them. So I'd like an answer from SG Collaborative directly. What that is.
And if you wanted to assure that it wouldn't be sold to some national rental group, you'd have to put that in a development agreement.
Mark, did you have something?
I think those are all good points, and I'm taking notes on each of those. I think it's that Eric made a good point that keep in mind the property owners are going to continue to pay their property taxes. They'll get a tax bill and pay the property taxes just like any other property owner in Webster. The retail tenants will pay their sales taxes, including any CID sales tax, to the Department of Revenue, just like any other retailer in the city of Webster Groves. But we can build in the provision, and I really don't see that as a big hurdle to build in the proper audit provisions to protect the city's interests and make sure that all the money, I think it's in the city's interest and the developer's interest, and believe me, the developer is going to want to ensure that all the money that should be captured by TIF is captured and makes it into the right pot. Because the developer will, and the developer's lender will front all of the money for the project with the hope of getting reimbursed out of the TIF revenue. So the developer's got, I think, the same interest that the city has in ensuring that all the money goes into the right place. So I really don't see, David, that as something the developer will be concerned about, to ensure that the pilots and the EATs are getting paid that should be getting paid.
The EATs, real quick, are the economic activity tax.
The sales taxes, right.
But again, so the tax revenue to repay the TIF is borne by the occupants.
It's borne by the taxpayers in that district.
Taxpayers in that district.
That's correct. So.
And then in terms of the businesses in that district,
they would pay a commercial property tax if they own their place.
Okay.
And then any sales tax differences are part of the SID. So the sales tax scheme regulation we have right now stays in place unless you approve a SID, which is a different sales tax to help supplement the pilots. And I'm going to turn back to Mark and make sure I got that right.
That's right. So I think it's just important to remember that, again, only the property owners within the boundaries of the redevelopment area are paying the property taxes revenue and the sales tax revenue that ultimately goes into the TIF. And the developer is betting, if you will, that as a result of building more buildings, the assessed valuation, the value of the property will go up. That will generate this new tax revenue. And so if it doesn't go up, that's or it doesn't go up as much as the developer projects, or as much as development strategies projects, then that's a risk that the developer and the developer's lender take. So they're going to build buildings hoping that the tax revenues are generated, but it doesn't affect the city's finances or any other property owner from a taxation standpoint.
and again, one of the reasons I asked, because I know at McKnight Crossings, up there, the sales taxes after food were like 13%. And I thought it had to do with the TIF that was required to make that development happen.
So, Mark, are you familiar with that specific example?
Yeah, I believe that there is just a single 1% extra sales tax. Now, there are developments around town that have both an extra 2%, both a community improvement district and a transportation development district. But what's being proposed here is just an extra 1 cent sales tax, not 2%. So 2% would be the maximum extra you could receive, or that a developer could get. This is proposed to be an extra 1 cent over what everybody else in the city pays.
So,
yeah,
go ahead, Jerry.
in the interest of moving forward, this is a good discussion. There's a lot here to talk about, because if we start a public hearing at our October 5th meeting, as we've already sent the information out, will we at that point have an opportunity to answer? Emerson had some really good questions, and Laura did, that need to be answered. Will we move forward in that hearing that we're opening on October the 5th with the ability to get those questions answered, and then start a parallel process for the development agreement? I mean, can we get those questions answered at a public hearing? Yes, Maura says yes. So we can
Yes, you can ask those questions.
we can ask those questions that are there, that you have, that others have. I personally want to have an opportunity to hear from some of the folks who own businesses in that area, what impact this has on them. Which is what Emerson's asking for too. And if we start with that October 5th hearing date, we can get some of this done, correct?
Just that we get all of our concerns down on one piece of paper, just so that they know exactly what we need to have to move forward.
They know what our concerns are.
I mean, I have a whole alternate set of concerns or questions, I should say. Things about what happens upstream, downstream, what the questions in the build scenario are, I think we've put a lot of them out there now, and we can put them more in the redevelopment agreement and stuff. But I am thinking about the alternate no build scenario. So, what would the cost be if this development didn't happen and we still need, the flooding is still going to be there, it still needs to be mitigated? What would the city, what would their responsibility be for that? What, in the no build scenario, what would be the cost to simply add new infrastructure or the minimum new infrastructure there? In the no build scenario, what would it cost to clean up Shady Creek?
You mean in the event we don't approve it?
Correct. So I want to know the costs separate. These would all be costs the city would bear that in the build scenario, the developer would do. So again, what would it cost to restore Shady Creek to being a usable, user-friendly, still get GRG in there? What would need to happen to
Great Rivers Greenway.
Greenway to complete the path? And then finally, I think the big thing is if we don't do a rezoning, is that area viable as in 4 different zones now? I mean, I understand
the situation, the 4 different zones years ago.
Well, I mean, the property, and there's a history in my PowerPoint presentation of different things that have happened over time. We as the city didn't put it into that situation. Property owners asked for rezonings. So there was a series of them. Yes, the city did put the one corner in play, which is the PC planned commercial a number of years ago to try to get some development to happen. But the rest of it was developer or development owners rezonings for the current elements of all the other zoning of the property.
So to complete my thought, is it viable as 4 separate zones? I mean, what would happen if there's no PC zoning and they all stay in those 4 separate zones? What would happen? I have my own thoughts of what would happen if it was zoned all industrial. Would people like that? If it were all zoned A4, would people like that? It seems right now, the way it stands, that all the property owners in each zone are hemmed in by those restrictions that they have. Some can't expand their footprint. Some can't add parking. So I think there are, and that's part of the reason why it's not been developed and the property values that are lower than surrounding areas. So those are some of the questions about no build.
We could
I
do a
just want to make
test
sure.
run and just let go of all zoning in that area. Just,
Yes.
I mean, if we're gonna talk about what's potential, let's get rid of zoning and see what happens. Because that's effectively what Prop 1 was kind of asking for.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think big picture for me, the whole thing is a negotiation. There's got to be a balance between, what we have, what we could have, what we want. I don't see it as like a strategy or we're trying to do any sort of thing that would cause division among the council or the community, but we want to try to find a balance for making this area more viable and more economically beneficial to us.
When you say economic beneficial, it's a projection of the revenue stream that's going to come in probably year 2 through eternity that's going to benefit the city.
Right.
And not only the city, school district, and everybody's taxing districts.
So we begin on October the 5th with our public hearing. Council comes with plenty of questions. We'll allow a lot of time for it. Make sure that you have your questions when you come.
Do you have questions, Jerry?
Oh, yeah, I've got lots of questions too.
Can we talk about that or no?
I mean, I'll bring them forward when we meet, but many of my questions are like the questions that Emerson just asked.
Well, would we be better to bring all those questions together and ask them as one? I mean, one of my questions might be able to be modified to answer one of Laura's questions, so we don't be asking for the same information over and over again.
Well, except I think we're all good at, if you ask a question and it's a simple tag along to something that Laura might say that she will acknowledge that.
I just
Well,
think we better
I mean,
one set.
I don't know that we have to have just one set of questions. I'm happy to send my questions ahead of time because I
Yes.
actually want answers, right? And some of the questions I have off the top of their head, they're not going to really probably be able to answer. Or, you know, I have 5 questions about the workforce housing itself. And so, you know, it's better if they have that in advance and can really
So you're
answer.
saying just send it to staff in advance,
Yeah.
all of us.
So certainly that would be, we can help answer questions that we know, and then also direct, questions to the development team if we know those questions ahead of time.
Okay.
We can certainly collect those.
As long as we hear each other's questions, I think that's a critical part of this too. I want to hear what other folks are at.
Well, I thought that was part of what this discussion was.
Yes.
So what
Yeah,
are your
But
questions?
I'm saying if we go out into a public hearing.
Yeah.
I think it's important that we don't have your question pre-answered and it's disposed of. I think it needs to be part of the public.
Oh,
hearing.
yeah, well, and
That's
if
what
they
I'm
decide during their presentation to answer some of these questions, that doesn't mean I won't ask more
Yeah,
specific.
that's what
I mean,
mean. That's what I mean, yeah.
because, I also just to do a few more highlights, because I have 2.5 pages of questions here. I'm interested in really understanding what the total occupancy is going to be, because that seems to vary based on, we know what the number of units are, but that, I don't know how that readily translates into people and the configuration of people and how people do that. I can't figure out the townhouses. At one point there were 8, then there were 20, then there were 16, and now there's a retention pond. So if we could get some more specific information on what that actually looks like. Got a set of traffic and pedestrian safety questions, cost questions about prices for the rental units, so that we understand who's going to actually get to live there.
So but are those related to the rezoning in your question?
I'm kind of folded everything into
We're-
one, because
yeah.
some of it will go in rezoning and some of it will go into the development agreement. And I sort of think it's only fair to the developer that they have some sense of what my concerns are
So
as
do
we
you
move
want us,
forward.
I mean, because I do have I'm only thinking about the rezoning. As I didn't think we would be changing the order so.
I think all the questions are helpful, right? Because whether
Okay,
or not
so we
they're in
can pull
zoning-
together
Exactly.
both.
Yes.
Let's
Okay.
get all of them out there, and
Let's
if it
add tree
takes-
preservation to
and
my
if it
list. too.
takes forever, it takes
Yeah.
forever, but we'll start out with that opening with you giving the presentation that you give and the questions then coming from.
And then some of
council
these things about the commissions that are still meeting with SG Collaborative. Those, any sorts of, I mean, I know, for example, like with the green space, I'm not gonna hear anything about what, any potential collaboration until after November 1st. And is that timing? I mean, maybe it would be good to know commissions, get your stuff in by a certain date, and what would that date be?
I think that's really the point of this conversation. I mean, obviously, you're not going to finish on October 5th with the public hearing.
No.
Right.
We all know that, but the TIF commission will be done likely on the 10th of November. Do you
Okay.
want commissions? And that's really a direction for us that we're asking is, do you want commissions to have things in by Thanksgiving, by December? What is, and
Right,
this
I
really
think
goes, if
we-
we work backwards, when is your optimal time as a council? You can always change this, but when do you want to see not only TIF up, we know when there's a time that has to be up, but
Right.
when do you want to see it on your agenda? But when do you want to see zoning and the redevelopment agreement on your agendas? Because once we sort of know that answer, even nebulously, if it's December, January, February, never, we can work backwards from that conversation.
What if the TIF commission doesn't approve the TIF?
They make recommendations, so they don't approve anything. So the recommendation would come, I'm going to turn to Mark. If they vote no on a recommendation, what happens?
Yeah, there's only certain items that the TIF can pay for, such as demolition, site development, some of the site development work. And so I think that would lead the developer to examine, whether the project is feasible under different scenarios.
So the point, to recap what Mark's saying is if we get a no vote on the TIF commission, the developer is likely going to step back and say, is this feasible, right? The whole point of asking for TIF is to prove the but for that we're not going to do this without the help of the public assistance in terms of the public infrastructure.
Well, I feel like we run into a tough position as council if the TIF commission comes back and doesn't recommend to pass the TIF, and then the zoning or the planning commission said 4-4, To me, it's like, I don't know if the community really wants it at that point.
Well, and that again, not to jump in on Neil's space, but that's ultimately, you always retain the legislative power. All they're doing is advising. So if they make negative or no recommendations, it's still, even if they made a glowing positive recommendation, it's still your decision. So all they are is voices on the shoulder, helping out.
Well, if we go back to the question, because the Sustainability Commission is also going to meet in October with them, and they, sent a letter during the Plan Commission process, and I know they want to update that and think through some of their discussion. Can we, since we have to know what the TIF Commission does, can't we just set that date for other commissions to?
Right.
Just, November 10th, any commission that wants to weigh in, you need to weigh in by then.
I'll probably give them to the end of that week so that they can see what the TIF commission, but certainly we can give them that date if that's what the council.
Because I do think there's some important voices in thinking some of those things through as well.
And can be some back and forth between SG and the commissions. We want this, okay, or whatever.
I told them we'd be 5 minutes.
But
so I do want us to kind of share where we are, and Karen's brought up some things, we all have qualms, but Jerry, what are your qualms or concerns or answers? Do you have answers you still need from things?
No. I've been listening to the community, and I think that's an important part of all of this. I'd like to see, my biggest concern is to get this moving along and over with, one way or another. Either move it along or whatever we're going to do. If we can't come to a development agreement, okay. Because the longer this goes on, the more the community is divided, and we just need to finish this up. I would hate to see this time next year, you're still futzing with the development agreement.
Oh, Lord, no.
When do we want to see this done? End of the year, January, May?
Well, my personal process on any project, I always look for a way to get it approved. I look at all the positives, and I look at what's going to be good for the city, but there are questions that I need to answer to keep that positive momentum going. So if you ask me, am I in favor of the development? I say yes. And that's what I'll be looking for, those positive criteria or answers to keep it moving.
And the redevelopment agreement will come out as an ordinance, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
I guess I'm still struggling. One of the things I wanted to walk out of here tonight was to be able to explain to somebody, how are we going to move forward? And what does that look like? And I don't know how to answer that question yet, other than to say, we're going to start hearings on October 5th, and we want to have input from all commissions by November 10th. I guess I could also say that it seems like the council wants to get to work on the redevelopment agreement right away as well, so it doesn't come after these other things. Is there anything else what am I missing here?
I think what I'm missing is a deadline. I thought we were going to be done by the end of the year, because I had some people keep asking.
Is that for the development agreement?
For the development agreement. I thought the development agreement was tied to the TIF.
Oh.
So that was my mistake. But I'd like to just see us say, Laura, your question, we'll have a development agreement on the agenda in January.
or December or February or whatever. That's what I'm looking for as a deadline.
I think that's kind of aggressive for the development agreement, to make sure we get everything in there that we need, what be reviewed and changed. Neil got to look at it. Mark got to look at it. I got to look at it.
Actually, Mark's got to write it.
Well, if I may just say, you're right. I've been taking a lot of notes and have at prior meetings as well. And so I appreciate the discourse because it provides, I think, the basis for an outline of key issues. And so I think if you keep feeding those to staff, that we can start the outline, work on an outline of the redevelopment agreement and continue the dialogue with the council about key issues. I agree with Emerson totally. We've got to make, we want to proceed as with diligence. We don't want this to drag on forever, but we want to make sure that we get all the issues covered. I say to councils all the time, anything that you want that can't be controlled through the planning and zoning process, we want to incorporate into the redevelopment agreement, whatever that may be. So we will do our best to identify potential, as Eric has thrown out some ideas tonight. We'll continue to throw out things for your consideration. We'll try and put some meat on the bone on the topics you've addressed, and we know what some of the key ones are, and so we'll start working on the redevelopment agreement so that and try and progress that as quickly as possible.
I do have another, I think we did mention town halls. Are we maybe going to have one? What's the interest there?
In regards to.
I don't understand the difference between a town hall and a public
So
hearing.
I think it would be part of the public hearing.
We have public hearings.
Right. Well, we do. I think the question is, do we have them here and is it in the same format that we've done, and how do we involve people? Is that what you're getting at, council member?
Yes, so that there could be a conversation rather than just a public hearing where we were listening and then, yeah.
So, and I guess,
I'm
that's
not
one of
sure.
the.
I just want to find out the interest of that, the benefits of it. I just want to have a discussion about whether we, I think there are some people that, there was a lot of community engagement at the beginning, and then the conceptual site plan came out, and then there's a lot of questions, concerns. I'm just wondering if we need to be able to have a conversation and more community engagement, because I do think people are asking for that, which to me would be better than not doing it.
I'd be okay with the town hall. I think though that if we're gonna do a town hall, we gotta wait till after the first of the year with the holidays coming up. So I would say it would be concentrated on the redevelopment agreement at that point. Approve the zoning and TIF, which is fine because I think that's really where the meat and potatoes is. But I would just recommend that we wait till after the first of the year, just based off of people's availability and schedules and everything with school.
I don't want to differ with you, Councilman, but we don't know that zoning has to be done with TIF. I think that's part of the process consideration we have to make here. But I also think there's a conversation about town halls. I mean, standing at the microphone for your 3 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is one version. But there are successful engagement models, and I think of the Ziegler Center in Milwaukee, where we get the curated conversations around the table with everyone having their moment.
More like our
questions.
housing town hall.
Yeah. And so, I think there's a possibility there that doesn't have to be a legislative function, but a true engagement function. If you,
to me, in a way, big picture, some more community engagement would be beneficial to answer that request more, than to hammer away at all the specific questions and criticisms, et cetera.
But the other advantage of it is, our public hearings are always going to be at the same time, and there are people who are just not available when we're doing this right now.
A little location, et cetera.
And if it seems a little more informal, some people will be more comfortable than they would in the public.
But that's what I guess. What would be the purpose? I'm all for.
Can I make?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not sure how this. The Plan Commission went through public hearings. Maybe it would be good to switch it up, try something different instead of repeating the same process with us. Another thought.
All right.
What would be the purpose of the town
Wait a minute.
hall, though?
I'm gonna suggest that we go and hold our regular meeting and we pick up this discussion after our regular meeting. We have people in there that we need to deal with. Let's do that and we can come back here and continue our discussion.
Mayor, as you all break, I do want to put this bug in your ear. To put on this calendar that we're trying to back into when you do want to start public hearing. We are getting questions, of course, already, as is Mara, about when that public hearing process might start. So do you, want it's, second meeting in October, first meeting in November, but that way we can start getting that word out as well and letting folks know how they can do that.
Really speaking to the actual public comments.
The
not
actual
the-
public comments that are associated with the zoning.
Yes.
And okay, we'll think about that. Okay, good evening and welcome to our regular city council meeting. And first, our apologies for taking so long. We never do this, but we were involved in a discussion about how to move forward with the SG Collaborative. And you have our apologies. So we'll call this meeting to order. And again, we ask that if you want to speak this evening, if you're here, give us a speaker card. And if you're on Zoom, raise your hand on Zoom and we will recognize you at the appropriate time for remarks of visitors. So we'll begin tonight with the roll call.
Mayor Welsh,
Here.
Councilmember Arnold,
Here.
Councilmember Bliss. Here. Councilmember Franklin.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Alexander. Here. Councilmember Richardson.
Here.
All right, our first agenda item tonight is remarks of visitors, and I have 2 speaker cards. The first is from Salvo Parenti. And Salvo, if you want to come up and speak. Yes, just come on up to the microphone.
All right, am I mic'd up? Good evening to the City Council. I'm Captain Salvo Parenti with the Webster Groves Fire Department, and I am the only active serving military member in the city of Webster Groves. 2 weeks ago, my wife wrote an email with her concerns to this City Council, and she has yet to hear a reply. When she wrote the email, I assured her that her message would not fall on deaf ears, and at the very least, she would receive a notification that her message was read by the council. My wife took great issue with the official statement issued by the city in that it wouldn't be prudent to honor the city's previous military benefit I received last time when I was deployed overseas 4 years ago. I mean, think about that actual statement. The city's official stance is that it wouldn't be prudent to support its only active serving military member. She was also hurt that the statement referred to my deployment as a leave of absence. So please be clear. This is an involuntary military deployment. I'm going overseas for 6 months to help with all the uncertainty that is happening in the world right now. And I assure you, when my wife is home alone with my 7-year-old son, she's not going to think of it as a leave of absence. A military spouse cannot hear these words without adding to her stress level. But maybe that's where we are right now. Maybe this is no longer the employee-friendly place it has been in the 12 years since I worked here. And I guess the city would rather pay lawyers to send this to arbitration. And to put this in perspective, when you compare, the military benefit, I think the city actually paid more for these TVs that are in the city council chambers, which, by the way, if you're sitting in the back, the overhead projector, I think was a little bit more appropriate. You could actually see the wordings from these 2 TVs if you're sitting in the back. And I think a lot of city employees would agree that we are on the wrong path. And this sentiment is not just in the fire department. This military benefit in question was approved by the previous city manager. And it was confirmed in an email to me that said, here is the city's new military policy. It has been approved by the city manager. The name of the document was Military Leave Revision 2017 City Manager Approved. And my wife asked me, how can they just act like these documents don't exist? And I don't have a good answer for her. At least acknowledge that you read my wife's email. Take one thing off her mind. It's the prudent thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Salvo. Thank you. My second speaker card is from Dave Buck.
Before I start, Firehouse One saved my house in the mid-90s. I'm 100% behind them and whatever they want. It's like they're just too valuable to our community. I actually changed my remarks based on your work session. I want to talk about Douglas Hill really quick from a perspective that I have not heard from any of you yet. The last 5 words of the mission statement of the city says a traditional yet progressive community. So there's traditionalists, there's progressive people. I'm a progressive. I like ideas. I'm hopeful. I'm an idealist. I support Douglas Hill because it's a great new breakthrough idea that thinks outside the box of safe, sleepy, conservative Webster Groves. I'm totally for it. But I'm also a realist and have seen what's been going on in this town. I think the decision has already been made. I think you guys are looking to do a colossal waste of time. I think history is going to repeat itself, and it stems back to the Mills project. Douglas Hill is almost identical in how it's unfolding to the Mills project. Mills project back in the early 2000s was big and bold. Community raised up and said, oh, I got height concerns, density concerns, traffic concerns, parking concerns, environmental concerns. Bruce Mills, Jerry, you know this, would not compromise, right? He didn't compromise.
Wouldn't compromise.
It got passed through the plan commission, city council approved it. A resident group in opposition raised up a referendum, citywide vote, defeated it in February 2004. Does that sound familiar on what's going on today? It's almost identical. And the point is that we're going down that path, and the resident opposition group has already showed its strength on the use tax, on Prop 1. If you watch the Plan Commission meetings, you know that there have been 2 or 3 hours of letters and comments in opposition. The community is speaking, just like they did against the Mills project. And the point is, I think the Plan Commission passed it on. You guys will approve it. The TIF Commission will approve it. It'll get passed. A resident opposition group will rise up just like they did on Prop 1, call for a referendum, just like on the Mills project, and they will vote it down. I think we already know what the destiny of this project is. It's too damn big. It's too damn tall. It doesn't capture the character and the charm and the bedroom community history and equity of Webster Groves. It's okay for Kirkwood. It could fit in Clayton, but not in our town. And I'm for it. I'm for the development, but I don't think it's going to pass. And I think that writing is already on the wall. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. All right, we'll go on to
We
unfinished.
need to look and see if there's any hands.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there hands up?
All good. Thank you.
All good. Thank you, Katie. All right, we'll move on to unfinished business. Councilmember Smith, Bill 9157, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9157 and call for its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9157, third reading. An ordinance levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2021 by the city of Webster Groves, Missouri, and repealing ordinance number 9127.
Are there any issues or questions?
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor. I'd like to move that we accept the proposed amendments dated 9/21/2021 that reflect the current rates as provided by the assessor's office.
Second.
Any discussion? Let's call for the vote on those changes.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Arnold?
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander?
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Mayor Welch?
Yes. All right, and I think they're not substantial enough to cause us to not have a third reading, correct?
I agree, yes.
It's like 1/100 of a penny.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Then let's call for the vote on 9157 as amended.
Councilmember Bliss?
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander? Yes. Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Mayor Welch?
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold?
Yes.
All right, Councilmember Bliss, 9158, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9158 and its subsequent adoption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill 9158, third reading. An ordinance levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2021 for the Webster Groves Library District and repealing ordinance number 9128.
All right, do your thing, Ms.
Yes,
Arnold.
Mayor, I move to accept the proposed amendments dated 9/21/2021 that reflect the updated data.
Second.
Are there any questions or issues? No, let's call for the vote on the updating.
Sure. Councilmember Franklin?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander? Yes. Councilmember Richardson?
Yes.
Mayor Welch,
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
All right, so are there any other issues? If not, would someone call for the third reading of 9158 as amended?
Mayor, I call for the reading of Bill number 9158 as amended.
Second.
Bill 9158, third reading as amended. An ordinance levying and establishing the rate of annual property taxes to be collected for the year 2021 for the Webster Groves Library District and repealing ordinance 9128.
All right, let's call for the vote.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander,
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welch,
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
All right, 9158 is passed. Councilmember Arnold, 9159, please.
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9159 and its subsequent adoption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Bill 9159, third reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit for SMR Auto LLC to permit the operation of an automobile dealership and automotive repair services facility on an approximately 0.65 acre tract at 8523 Watson Road in the C Commercial District and repealing ordinance 9017 and matters related thereto.
All right, any questions or comments? Let's call for the vote.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold,
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
All right, Bill 9160, Councilmember Franklin.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the third and final reading of Bill number 9160 and its subsequent adoption.
Second.
Bill 9160, third reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, amending Chapter 4, Boards and Commissions, Article 20, Police Community Engagement Board, by repealing Section 4.1230, sunset, and matters related thereto.
Any comments or questions? Call for the vote.
Councilmember Richardson,
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
All right, 9160 is passed. Councilwoman Alexander, 9161, please.
Yes, I would like to call for the third and final reading for Bill number 9161.
Second.
Bill 9161, third reading. An ordinance levying the cost of abating certain nuisances, cut, trim, remove trash and debris, etc., as special tax bills against the properties hereinafter described and constituting levies as liens on the respective properties.
Any questions or issues? Call for the vote.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
9161 is passed. 9162, Councilmember Smith.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9162.
Second.
Bill 9162, first reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, adopting and enacting new fee schedules for applications, permits, plan reviews, inspections, and repealing ordinance 8769 and matters related thereto.
Are there any questions or issues? And let's do the second reading, Neil.
Bill 9162, second reading. An ordinance of the City of Webster Groves, Missouri, adopting and enacting new fee schedules for applications, permits, plan reviews, inspections, and repealing ordinance 8769 and matters related thereto.
All right, let's go to 9163, Councilwoman Bliss.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9163.
Second.
Bill 9163, first reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute on behalf of the City of Webster Groves an easement to the Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, across a portion of 307 Marshall Avenue, locator 22K 530660.
Are there any questions or issues?
My only question is, why are we doing two of these? Is it because of the locator number?
Right, they're two different locations.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the same address though?
One is east of the property.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, if I recall correctly. Yes.
Any other questions? Let's do that second reading.
Bill 9163, second reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute on behalf of the city of Webster Groves an easement to the Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, across a portion of 307 Marshall Avenue, locator number 22K 530660.
All right, Councilwoman Arnold, 9164, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of Bill number 9164.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you.
Bill 9164, first reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute on behalf of the city of Webster Groves an easement to the Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, across a portion of a parcel east of 307 Marshall Avenue, locator number 0L0805013.
Are there any questions or issues? Let's do the second reading.
Bill 9164, second reading. An ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute on behalf of the city of Webster Groves an easement to the Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, across a portion of a parcel east of 307 Marshall Avenue, locator number 0L0805013.
All right, Councilmember Franklin, 9165, please.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for the first and second reading of bill number 9165.
Second.
Bill 9165, first reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 60, the Traffic Code, Article 16, Section 60.996, Schedule M of the Code of Webster Groves, left turns prohibited, to prohibit left turns onto Ambrose Way from southbound South Elm Avenue from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on school days.
Are there any questions or issues? Let's go for that second reading.
Bill 9165, second reading. An ordinance amending Chapter 60, the Traffic Code, Article 16, Section 60.996, Schedule M of the Code of Webster Groves, left turns prohibited, to prohibit left turns onto Ambrose Way from southbound South Elm Avenue from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. on school days.
All right, does anyone care to remove anything from the consent agenda? If not, Councilwoman Alexander, could you call for its approval?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to call for the approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes. And we did not make any appointments to boards and commissions this evening.
Did the sustainability.
No, we didn't officially appoint anybody.
Oh, we didn't?
We
Okay.
didn't.
Oh, we didn't come back around to that
We
yet,
never
did
came
we?
around.
Sorry,
to
I apologize,
actually
Mayor.
voting on any of them.
If you go back into the work session,
We can do it back then at the work session. Yes, we can, and then make that announcement afterwards. All right. Are we a closed session? tonight?
We are. We have under subsection 1
Okay.
and subsection 2.
Wondered.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to call for an executive closed session under number 1, attorney-client privilege communications, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 1, close paren, and number 2, real estate, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 2, close paren.
And subsection 4.
And subsection 4, negotiated contract, Missouri Statute 610.021, open paren 12, close paren.
Second.
Councilmember Bliss.
Yes.
Councilmember Franklin.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Councilmember Alexander.
Yes.
Councilmember Richardson.
Yes.
Mayor Welch.
Yes.
Councilmember Arnold.
Yes.
All right. We will go into closed session because we do have an attorney here that probably has been sitting here for a long time. Let's go ahead and take care of that. We come out of closed session. We will continue with the work session.
We'll be enclosed over there.
Yes, we will
So
move that.
those on Zoom, you can stay on this meeting. We'll come back after we're done with the closed session.
Okay.
Councilmember Richardson, you'll need to move. So.
All right, so we will do that. I want to thank the firefighters for coming this evening.
There's Karen Beck, Jane Grady.
How does
that?
I know, we had a pretty quick.
nothing on the agenda.
How does that?
Okay.
All right, so we're on and active. And we'll, I'm good.
It's a quarter of 10.
And we do have some folks with us, so.
I'm good, thank you. I've got one.
No, I'm good, thank you.
So Councilmember Richardson is joining us, and then we'll be ready to go.
I would have got my flavor.
Are you going to Maddie if the business succession plan? should I go to city council?
So you will brew iced tea.
Yes, you know that. They got that.
Mayor, do you want me to restart this? So on the work session, folks, we ended with
We ended with
this slide. I'm sorry.
this
Did you get out?
slide,
Let me
and
get the
we
slide.
ended with trying to figure out where we were going next
Exactly.
with this process.
Right.
And so we have already advertised for an October the 5th city council public hearing. And so I think one of the questions that Eric left us with is, do we want to take, how much public comment do we want to take at that meeting? Do we want to just do an overview and have the council ask a lot of questions as we've been talking about? And then perhaps put off the public comment to the next meeting? I mean, that might be a better way to go rather than, and just pull it all together in one lump area, some like they've done with the planning commission, where you just pull it together at one time. Is that what we want to do going forward, so that we would do the second meeting in October for public comment? Because we're going to get a lot of it.
Could we do a special meeting? Where we just do a separate one devoted solely to Douglas? Yeah,
Public comment,
on
yeah, we
Douglas
can,
Manor.
we can do that also.
That's
We can do that.
what we did in planning.
In planning.
That way there's
So
something
that would
else on
be
our agenda.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I
Just
should need it
listen to
everywhere.
that.
So
Thank
that
you,
would be
Chris.
after the second
They
council
got a lot
meeting?
in there.
After the second October council?
Well, they have
meeting?
more.
Yeah, that's
Or-
up to you. It's
It's
when
up
you
to
do it.
us, yeah.
But we also did we did that by Zoom, right?
We had people here too.
Oh, that's
We should have people here.
I think there's value in having October 5th be presentations, right? Because before we get the public comment, we could compile questions that are in a way to help educate the public comment. I think that the real, the crux of where we left this is not just how do we take public comment, but are we having a deadline for ourselves? The zoning and the development agreement. We know TIF's in December at the latest. Is zoning and development at that same time? Are we at a different point? Are we concurrent? Are we before that? Are we after that? And that's really so we can really, as staff, start to back in calendars and make some good engagement plans and fit whatever process goals you all want. And I'll just add, we all know that we're coming up on, April is an election time as well. And so we've got lots of things on the agenda this year, including potentially use tax. So,
And can I throw that out just in timing to think about this? Because if we in December approve TIF, you are going to get perhaps a referendum issue. Now, Mark Grimm and I have been going over this. There's a question about whether or not TIF would be amenable to a referendum. And the reason I say this, it's never been tested. So if you look at our charter has a specific provision that says there are certain things that are not subject to referendum. Special tax assessments, the levying of a tax or not. So the question is TIF a levying of a tax? Yeah, but it's never been tested. There's not a single case in Missouri that has tested that proposition. If it is, then once you guys would pass whatever it is, 15 days, if somebody's going to do a referendum, they have to gather the signatures. They then get it to Katie, who has 15 days to verify. At that point, if Katie verifies it and I look at it and say it's appropriate as to form, at that point, we then have to come back to you and say, you all now need to set this and you need to decide whether to repeal it or not within 30 days of that first 30 days, 15 plus 15 plus 30. So now we're 60 days out. If at that point you vote not to repeal, just like we saw before, you now have to get it on the ballot within 90 days. In order to make that April ballot, everything would have to be done by February the 8th. Okay, so remember the drop dead date now, again, filing, actually, the regular filing period actually closes well before that. But but you can actually go up to 8 weeks before and still with a court order. And so just like we did before, we got a court order, got it on there. that the election commission isn't gonna fight with us on this. But again, that's what we'd have to do in order to get it onto the April ballot. So we do have to pay attention to the timing on these things. If we don't get it on one of the regular ballots, then we simply have to have a special election, and those are tremendously costly. And it may be a reality where we are, but I say keep that in mind. Now, there are 4 of you who are running as well.
I just want to add to that, outside of April though, if the process does want to go longer, theoretically, there is the August election. You can start to back in from if you think a petition's coming, so.
Right, except you got that 90-day window that you have to do.
Correct, right.
So again, there's a couple of different ways that we can deal with the time. We can accelerate it, we can lengthen it, but just keep that in mind.
So, I mean, I'm just looking at it, if we gave this the same due diligence that the plan commission did as far as number of meetings and similar structure, it doesn't have to be the same, but that was 5 meetings. And 5 meetings would put us into January on
first read.
Yeah. So.
That's to the zoning.
Yes.
Which could also be.
But the redevelopment.
You don't really have a time
agreement-
issue.
There's not a development agreement that will.
It's got to keep moving too. 'Cause
Well,
otherwise.
no, I know, but I'm
yeah.
just saying, I don't know, why do we need to, why? I understand the tip thing, I'm just trying to figure out. I guess rushing this through and voting for it is like we're playing to our usual way of doing things. I'm just thinking about how Prop 1 happened. Kind of rushed through that one a little bit. I mean, I think, and so I guess I'm trying to be mindful of the community by trying to do things differently and not cram things through. That's, I guess, my thing.
I guess
there's any chance for success.
We could approve, I mean, the only arbitrary deadline, and it's not really arbitrary, but the only deadline that we truly have is that TIF by December 30th.
Right.
We could theoretically prove the TIF and prove the zoning and the development agreement in 2022. And if we don't agree on those 2 things or only one of those things, then we just go back and repeal the TIF.
Is it possible to do the timing of the rezoning and the development agreement at the same time?
With the TIF or those 2 together?
We could do those 2.
With those 2 together and the
Yes.
TIF separately?
We can do those together.
That's what-
Because that seems to make sense, I think.
The
just
harder
to me.
thing is going to be the redevelopment
Redevelopment
agreement
agreement.
and the zoning issue. Those are the more complicated issues. Because TIF is simply saying, if you guys get everything else together, then you've got this.
Right, I guess.
And those
So-
are the 2 things because they are actual ordinances
Right.
that will likely be subject to a referendum.
Well, they'll actually all 3 be ordinances. So we'll have an ordinance on TIF as well. So everything is there. It just, TIF is arguable as to whether or not that is actionable as a referendum.
Yeah, so you don't.
I'm a little uncomfortable though, suggesting that we're going to litigate whether our voters get to weigh in on the TIF or not.
Yeah, I know.
That's a challenge.
I get it, but again, we have specific provisions in the charter. that we
No,
have
I
to
understand.
adhere to. So
I
if
do.
that's the case,
They'll litigate on the other 2 issues, right?
I guarantee.
Yeah, I mean,
Somewhere along
we're going to have, I'm pretty
We're
sure we're
gonna
going to have a referendum no matter what,
But
but
referendum, no matter what we do, there
It's-
will be a referendum.
It's
But then-
interesting that the charter, just to give you backstory, the charter limits the right of the voters when it comes to levying taxes and budget appropriations. So 2 things they cannot do in initiative and referendum.
Yeah.
So you
I
think
guess-
we would get a referendum if we did? Can we get a referendum if we say no?
Yes, you could still have someone that could come forward and say, it would be an initiative, not a referendum.
Referendum.
So, I mean, it's the difference between mandamus and prohibition, right? So,
I guess my comment on timing is, our plan right now is October 5th to open with a whole bunch of questions. I don't believe they're going to have answers to all those questions when they're in front of us October 5th. And so in terms of setting any sort of deadline until we get a sense of what we know and what we still need to find out, I think we'll know more after that October 5th meeting. I'm fine with setting something sort of tentatively, but I think we need to be open to adjusting that once we've had that at least opening discussion about some of these things that are unanswered questions. Because there were questions, in theory, some of them like how do the railroad tracks interplay with the traffic study? They know that that's a concern. And so in theory, that's being addressed. It's information they'd have. I'm thinking about questions maybe they haven't heard yet that some of us may bring up.
Well, and I think that's exactly right, Laura. Like, set a tentative schedule. If we need to go beyond that for the zoning and the development agreement, so be it. We'll figure out the TIF and get that approved or disapproved or, voted down by December 31st.
Yeah.
I think that should be a number one priority and goal. And then everything else, it's like you do a tentative schedule. Hopefully we meet it as fast as we can, but if not, we got time.
I guess that's where I was going. And the
Yeah.
initial thing is I was not setting a deadline. I'm just saying we need to, it would be good to take at least that same number of meetings to study things.
So let's start out with October for 2 meetings of the zoning, for rezoning. And see where we get with that, what the questions are, how many people respond to our public hearing. And at the same time, you and Mark said you wanted to start working on some elements of a development agreement. And you should do that at the same time. And maybe come November, we would have the beginning elements of a development agreement and we would still be winding up the zoning process. So we see where we are in November. Because we'll have all 3 pieces. Something's in progress. Maybe we just have 2 zoning meetings and call it quits, or maybe we have 4. I don't know, but let's see how they.
There's enough, Eric, will you be the one communicating the commission to staff and maybe the commission chairs that they have a November 10th kind of?
Yeah, Dr. Peoples and I will be.
Okay.
Certainly hearing that. And I don't want, I'm sorry, council member Arnold.
No, there is no requirement that if we do the public hearing, that we keep it open from consecutive meetings, right? So we may want in the middle, if we're waiting for things,
Right, we just not
to
have
just
that.
do some other regular business and.
push
Yeah.
it. Yeah. We'll see.
I would guess that if we start October 5th, I'm guessing I don't think Mark is here to join. He is? Okay, let me bring him on. He's not? Okay.
Okay.
So, but Neil and Dr. Peoples, I am guessing that even if we start October 5th, we're probably looking at December at the earliest for zoning and development.
Yes.
Yes, and I mean, and I think really, Councilmember Bliss is what I'm hearing, especially in your comments, but really to all of you, is what level of public engagement the council wants to see. Not just the hearings, if you want them any more than that.
Right.
And what we need to schedule. If Jenny,
Right.
if we need to pull a town hall together, or if it's, pancake breakfast where we all submit surveys. I don't know, you know what I mean?
That
What do we?
sounds fun.
Well, we might have a new firehouse by the time this happens, so we may be doing it right there, so. Yeah.
I mean, it could.
But I think those are the kind of things, like, we can start to lay out those things, but those engagement questions, which you probably don't normally have to think about, add those into your thoughts and timeline stuff, because that may add time or,
I mean, some of these details could involve some community vision.
Sure.
And input.
I certainly could. We could have the stations, right, where here's a facade of the thing. What do you want to see different? How do you like to see green roofs built? And all those provisions that can be.
Right.
effective.
I think, I mean, that would be.
So it would be prudent to try to get them to answer as many as the common questions in the open session. Because all they're going to do is come back and repeat everything they've said for the last 5-6 months.
I know.
When we're talking about the traffic or whatever it is, this is what we've done to alleviate the traffic, yada, 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 yada. So that subject is just dead.
Well, but I think to your point about traffic, and if you want to make that an enforcement of their answers, is really what you're talking about, right? Like, if they're going to alleviate that problem, the enforcement is really, we put that in the redevelopment agreement. You said publicly you're willing to mitigate that. Here's the hammer from the city in the redevelopment agreement that you're going to mitigate that this way.
If there's anything I've taken away from Mark Grimm's, the only document, all these other things are just structures that allow everything else to happen. It's the redevelopment agreement that is the key. That's where everything is going to be. And as he said tonight, you're going to get the framework in terms of here, but it's the details. It's everything else that goes into that. That's your wish list. And that's what becomes good. But keep in mind, it's a negotiated thing too. So again, I don't know, and this is a guess because you all know this is my first rodeo when it comes to these. But my guess is if I'm Larry Chapman, I'm really not negotiating over this until I know what's in place. So, I mean, he may be dragging his feet until we have the structure in place for him to say, okay, here's where we go, and that's when we get down to the nitty-gritty.
There is a big question about eminent domain. I mean, before you go anywhere, is the council willing to grant him eminent domain? Because he has said repeatedly, he cannot do this without that right. And so I think that's a really important piece of the development agreement that the council needs to wrestle with.
But isn't that part of negotiating for the purchase price?
Neil, can we, just so we all have it, and we want to make sure we phrase it right, eminent domain would be granted in the agreement as a possibility, but it's still only a power exercised by the city.
Yes.
So I just want to be clear when we say granting him, Larry doesn't get the right to remove somebody. That ultimately is an action still back to the city, right? If you value so the public doesn't think Larry gets some special power, that's still a vested power.
And I have had some litigation contact with eminent domain, and it is not a happy place for anybody. And again, it really is an act of desperation. It's a last act. You don't do it because it's easier. You do it because you can't do anything else. And, again, it becomes really problematic, but there's very specific formulas that you have to follow, and there's lots of costs that get covered and recovered, and it takes a long time. So it's not to a developer's advantage, as Mark has said many times, but I've seen it myself. It's not to their advantage to do it, but you have to have it as basically a hammer in order to be able to enforce or make people move forward on the agreements. That's really what it is.
So
Standard in most agreements.
if it rests with us, what's the mechanism then? I mean, how do we
So-
make that decision as a?
Parcel A, you go through this whole development, parcel A doesn't sell.
Right.
Is it an ordinance or an action of it?
If you file an action with the court, you file a petition with the court regarding condemnation. And that's where the word condemnation.
Yeah, but how do we come to an agreement about whether or not that's going to happen? Because you said it rests with us. I'm trying to understand what the process looks like, because I obviously never
So
been through this.
ultimately, the developer comes in and says, this is the sole holdout. This is the last
Yeah.
person that they won't go. Okay. Then under those circumstances, a petition gets filed in the circuit court, which triggers the process.
Which is you authorize.
But you all would have to authorize, so we require a majority.
But we're only looking at a parcel at a time. So if somebody in parcel RPA 3 doesn't want to sell.
Yeah. But here, let me throw in here. If you're building this into the redevelopment agreement that says it's there, you cannot withhold it. You cannot unreasonably withhold it. Okay. So you're committing yourself to doing it at the point where you're entering into the redevelopment agreement.
Is it a blanket commitment, or is it, say
Per parcel?
no, or say, you've got everybody but 2 property owners, and on the last couple you can exercise? I mean, how specific can we be about how you define the parameters of it?
So again, because I haven't written this, I would defer that question to Mark.
Okay.
But we'll
I'm
make
not
that
certain,
question.
Lauren. I don't
Yeah.
want to give you bad information.
No, but I would like to be on the record that I do want a
Sure.
better understanding of
Sure, no, I
what
get
the
it.
mechanism would be.
I get it. But Mark's the guy
Yeah.
to talk to that.
And for the world, I'm not suggesting that I'm necessarily in favor of it, but I want to understand what we're deciding
No,
on.
I get it. I get it. And that's a fair question, and I will get it to Mark.
Did you get what you need from us?
Well, we've got a lot to start. I think we'll start building if the council's plan that you can always change, but really that's looking at December. Like I said, is probably our earliest for those other 2 actions. The TIF we know is on a schedule we've sort of set. We'll build a plan, but again, that involves you constantly looking at the plan and taking the temperature of the community and what you think and what you need to add or take away from the plan to look at. Dr. Peoples, anything I missed in that?
So thank you. And not anything that you missed, but if you would please forward us your questions that you already have, so we can compile them. And that's not to say that you can't ask additional questions or ask in a different way, but this will help us make the best use of your time on October 5th.
Will you submit those early to Larry?
Yes, that's my whole goal. We will take those from you all, we'll package them up, and we don't even have to massage them. Put them all in one document and ask them to be prepared for that meeting.
But some will be just for staff to answer.
So
Yeah.
But you'll be the traffic control.
I wonder if the council, and I don't mean to belabor this, we obviously know the normal process Mara's team is going to present on their zoning ordinance. Would it be helpful to have Mark Grimm present on the potentials of the redevelopment agreement and the overall parts of the process in the beginning of this public comment?
Yeah, I think-
There's parts of this he's
I
going
think
to
that'd be
answer.
very good.
And then obviously having SG Collaborative, usually they present at these hearings as well. Is that, am I right, Mara, at the council hearings? So we have three major presentations with Q&A
Yeah.
for that October 5th.
That would be great.
You got hands up, thumbs
And
up all?
Laura, is their traffic study didn't include the railroad at all. Is there any way that we can push for a traffic study that is more comprehensive?
So typically, traffic studies do not integrate a railroad that does not have a regular
I
schedule.
understand that.
So I've never heard of,
So how do we account for that? I mean, the 38 or 40 trains a day that go through there.
so they've accounted for it by requiring the lights that would be timed with the railroad
But
arm.
we don't know, we still don't have anything like how many railroad trains go through a day and how
It's-
long they are, none of that.
Well, because they're varied. There is no schedule. There is no regular schedule for
Okay.
that railroad. Yeah, there is absolutely no regular schedule for that railroad in terms of the length of trains or how many go through a day. Some days a completely different number goes through than others. Both at Union Pacific and Burlington Northern are both like that.
But you did mention, looking back at the historic data from 2018, that was going to be part of a report, correct?
They did look at that. We sent all of our
Okay.
traffic data that the Public Works Department had, and she did provide
Okay.
some feedback. It didn't give us anything particularly different in terms of helping us to understand if the 30% worked, which is why in the staff recommendations, we recommended that they do another set of traffic counts prior to the final development plan.
Isn't one of the things they're talking about is they're putting the lights like you see down on Manchester in the city. They're putting lights up that say the train coming, don't come up Rock Hill or don't come up Gore. So it's blocking them at Kirkham, deflecting them away from there. So that's kind of an interesting approach. Although if you go in the city, go along Manchester, you see that light. It is about 6.5 feet from the train track. You know there's a damn train. I don't need this light.
That's right.
People in Oak Street and Marshall Place aren't going to be happy to hear that interpretation of that particular sign.
That's probably right. You're right.
All right, is there anything else?
Did you want to address the boards and commissions?
Oh.
One other question, Eric, when do you want our questions by when?
So I think for fairness for staff and such, yeah. So to give us at least a week, if we could have them next Monday, that gives you a weekend to get them done. Is that doable? Mayor, members?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, just next Monday,
Next Monday?
next
Okay.
Monday.
Sure.
So
Eric, Cardinals won. Let's have a moment. of
Yeah,
silence.
we're still clinched already. So. And the Packers won last night.
I'm
We still have a
grateful.
football
I'm
team. you know.
grateful to the Bruins. I want you to know.
Speaking about writing a good development agreement.
We're about to get pretty rich because of that.
Yeah. And I couldn't be happy.
Yeah.
Frankie's money.
All right, forget the sports.
Okay.
I know I never say that, but forget the
Wait a
sports.
minute, boards and commissions. Sally Kilbride looks, but we're gonna hold off because we have somebody else interested.
One more.
She's good. Sustainability, Anwar, I think she'd be
Yes.
great.
Yes, so the Sustainability Commission is all on board for both of these people.
People, okay, is this okay with everybody?
Oh, yeah, her and her husband are very active.
Okay.
They're my neighbors, so I've seen.
Well,
Yeah, her husband's on the
that's,
BDC.
Dr.
I forgot what commission he's serving on now.
BDC.
He's on the
BDC,
business.
He's the dentist?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Oh, cool. Okay, Ann Barenkamp.
Yes.
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 Definitely, yes. Okay. Yes, Ken Burns would like to be reappointed to the ARB.
Yep.
Yes.
Linda Green would like to be reappointed to Green Space.
Yes.
Yeah.
We still have an opening there though, right? In green space?
In October.
Yeah.
Is that when Tessa's
Yes.
going?
Historic Preservation, Angela Thompson, I think that would be
Yes.
great.
Yeah, I
to
think
have
that's
that.
good. And there's still one opening, right?
Yeah.
For somebody with the Historical Society
Yeah, all of
overlap.
our kids have left. They're
Oh,
all
what a
off in
wonderful
college.
match. And I'd still like to know why Bill Wickman withdrew, and I probably will send him an email.
He said that he feels like they spend too much time on demolitions. And I tried to explain to him that it's just been our limitations through COVID. And he doesn't always listen. I explained to him, I spent a lot of time giving
My
him
wife has
information.
never said that.
So, okay.
We're still recording.
Well, then I won't bother.
He did say he's still working on the projects, he's still
Yeah,
gonna keep doing the website, and we're still working with him.
Good.
We're definitely
That's
still
good.
working, but yeah, I explained to him a couple different times that we had a lot of really cool projects there.
But they got to resign from the Board of Adjustments because of COVID. That's empty or?
Well, he didn't really resign. He sent a letter suspending his membership, which, and I'm not gonna tell you what the lawyer says. What I would say is, that's like no showing up for work. Like, it's really your decision whether or not he remains a member. My opinion, I'll look at me, so.
It was an
I have no
alternate.
opinion.
So let's just not deal with him tonight.
Yeah.
It's 10:15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I will
What,
tell these
wanna go
folks and we'll officially make the appointment.
Well,
so the next meeting.
Yeah,
All right,
tell
thank
them
you.
that they've been appointed, so,
Thank you.
that'll be
Is this
good.
party over?
It's just getting
Or
started.
is it just getting started?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
So you're gonna have to fill out the M&M.
Yeah.
Just go grab from the other room.
So you know the meeting's over then.
That's,
Karen and I did our job.
Well, there are a few left up here.
Are we adjourned, Madam Mayor?
Are you? Yes, you're adjourned.
We're adjourned, all right.
Good night, everybody.
Bye.